Or is the YouTube ready? Okay. It's April 13th, 6 p.m. We'll call the Planning Commission to order for Tokerville City. And on the first item, we'll have the Pledge of Allegiance by Commissioner Huntsman.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, does any commission members have any disclosures or declarations of conflict?
Nope.
Okay, that'll take us to item B1 for the agenda.
I'd like to make a motion to change the agenda. The order would be approval of the agenda that we change would be B1, and B2 would be swearing in of the new planning commission members.
Okay, we have a motion looking for a second.
Second.
Okay, motion and a second. We'll take a vote.
Aye.
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 Okay, that brings us to item B2, swearing in of the new members.
And we're going to be able to stand up and go right over. You guys know how to stand up? Both raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Wayne Olson,
I, Andrea Odd,
Do solemnly swear
solemnly swear
that I will support,
that I will support,
obey, and defend
obey and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution
and the Constitution
of the State of Utah,
of the State of Utah,
and that I will discharge
and that I will discharge
the duties of my office
the duties of my office
with fidelity.
with fidelity.
Okay, welcome aboard. That'll take us to the review of the minutes. We just have the minutes from February 9th, 2022. Does that question that you asked, was that for that meeting?
No, that was on March.
On the March ones? Okay, so we just have the February's the only ones in there, but did anybody see any issues we needed to fix for them?
February?
No.
No.
Okay, I'd entertain a motion.
I motion that we approve the minutes for February 9th meeting.
I second that motion.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. We'll take a vote.
Aye.
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 You can vote.
I wasn't here.
Oh,
Don't know the
abstain.
minutes. I can't. I'll just abstain.
Perfect. Okay, you even told me that. This brings us to the public forum portion of our meeting. The public forum portion of the meeting is for anything that's not on the agenda. It's anything that you want to address the commission about. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. And when you address the microphone, please state your name and your address. No takers? Okay, we'll close the public forum portion. To bring us to the report section, the planning chair, for me, I don't have anything to report at this time. Does any of the commissioners have anything to report? No? How about Mr. Darren Lefevre, planning and zoning administrator?
Not at the time.
Don't really have much at this time extra above beyond the agenda tonight, but as we come to those items, I'll have some input on each item.
That'll take us to business items. And the first business item is annual renewal for a home occupation permit located at 250 South Pioneer Road. The applicant is Joshua Zitting. Concerns concerns about that, and everything's current on theirs? Although, okay. No? I'll look for a motion.
I recommend approval on item F1. I'll
I
second,
sec- Go ahead.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. We'll take a vote.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, that brings to item 2, discussion on a nightly rental application submitted by Mark Merkling. So at this time, let's see, we'll have Darren introduce it, and he'll read in the staff comments and give us a small rundown of what's going on with that.
Okay, on the Merkling nightly rental, I hope I said that right. Good, okay. We took it before the JUC, which is the Joint Utility Committee. They had comments that's in your packets. All of the utilities are adequate. There are adequate utilities and services. The property boundary map, we asked a while back, this has been going before I began working here, but there was a clarification on the size of the parking stalls. I don't have that. We do believe it came to the office somewhere, and so I was going to ask the applicants for that. Other than that, I do believe they submitted that to the city, but you don't have that in your packets just because we could not find it as staff. I have not had the opportunity to call them and ask them, but as far as that, I believe that they could submit that to us and we would review. So your motion could be conditional upon that. That could be one of the conditions. And then the other was the building no building elevations were submitted. But we'll hear from them in just a second. But so staff, we would recommend approval with this application with the conditions of the above few things that they still needed, that we were not unclear. And I don't believe that was because of the lack of the applicants not getting them. It was some shuffling in the remodeling of this building and change of staff. And that's all I had, unless you have questions for me.
I saw the parking with the 2 parking spots out by the garage.
So you do have in your packet that site plan that shows where they've designated the 2 spots. We just wanted to verify that those spots were wide enough and big enough so that they don't park inside the driveway going to the back. One of the comments of the fire district was that they wanted to make sure that alleyway is always clear, for obvious reasons. So, and that's what we're waiting for. And I believe that the applicant has submitted that shows that it is, so we would just, once we get that, we would go, yeah. So there's that map right there. So they see the green that they've, the designation of the 2 spots.
Parking this way and 2 parking this way.
Actually, yeah, if you come up to the microphone, just make sure you state your name and.
Yeah, I am Mark Merkling, the applicant. I kind of overdid it on this because there are actually 4 parking places. There's 2 in the driveway that go into the one under a carport and one behind it. That's straight off of Toker Boulevard. Additionally, there's the option for 2 additional parking places in front of the garage in the rear. And yes, I park my Toyota truck back there with plenty of clearance, garage, and Lily Lane, which is the easement that is granted from our property to go back to the property that is behind us. So if you want to just scratch the 2 in front of the garage to avoid confusion, I've got more than enough street parking for the Airbnb.
Yeah, I think one of the things was just that keep just 1 in the front so that you didn't have somebody blocked in.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we got 1.
What is the dimensions? What do we have, maybe rough idea? From your house to Lily Lane?
From the garage, probably 35 feet. Like I said, I pull my truck up to the front of the garage. I got 5 feet to the garage and 5 feet to the lane, the full-size pickup.
Okay, does anybody else have any questions for?
We did not submit an elevation drawing. I couldn't find anywhere in the application that requested an elevation drawing. Okay. Okay, appreciate it.
We open the public hearing for this item? No? Okay, at this time, we'd like to open up the public hearing for item, or for the Merkling nightly rental. Public input is sought on a nightly rental application submitted by Mark Merkling for tax ID number T-68-A-2. Current zoning is R112, single family residential. If anybody would like to comment on this, please address us at the microphone. Okay, we do have to, I have one email here that they want to read in, and it's, we, Jacob and Tirza Stewart, own and live in the adjoining property to the Merklings intended nightly rental. We have 2 nightly rentals across the street from our property. We have had nightly rentals on the adjoining property to the other sides of us. Our experience is that having a nightly rental in the area has always been a positive. It has both improved the care of the properties, and the guests have yet to be a disturbance. We like seeing these who come to the recent to recreate in southern Utah enjoy a night or two in our beautiful Tokerville. We strongly feel that the Merklings have the right to use their property as they intend, and that there is no need for the city to infringe on those rights. We fully support them and encourage the city to do likewise. Sincerely, Jacob and Tirza Stewart. Okay. Is there any other comments for the public hearing portion? Okay, I'd take a motion to close the public hearing for this item.
Motion to close it. I'll second the motion.
Okay, I have a motion second. We'll take a vote.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, do we have any other comments that we'd like to discuss about this? No? If there's no other discussion, I'd entertain a motion for the,
I do have one just quick. Do we have a permit application for nightly rental? that we
yeah,
can
it's in
look-
their file.
It's in the file. It's in
Yeah,
your-
I don't have that with me. I'm just wanting to see if they actually do call out elevations.
The elevation call out.
Yes.
I think it's-
Okay. Okay. I'd entertain a
I will make a motion for approval of item F2 with the inclusion of staff comments and to make sure that all what they've requested has been completed.
I second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. We'll take a vote.
Aye.
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 Okay, that will take us down to business item number 3, the discussion on a nightly rental application submitted by Stephanie and Mike Giddens. And right now, we'll let Darren speak to this also.
So the Giddens nightly rental, could we pull that up by chance? Just so the people in the audience have the ability to see that, their maps. So let's scroll down just a little. So their floor plan is that basically it's just connected to the home there. The next 2 slides. Let's come down one more, I think it is, or 2 or 4 more. I'm sorry. So they show that right there on that red is the designations for the off-street parking. That requirement is met there. And then they also go further in detail on one of the maps down a little bit lower, that right there, that actually gives you the dimensions of that so that you can see the adequacy of a typical parking stall is 18 feet by 9 feet. When you pull into your grocery store. So that's what's required. They've got ample room for that, plus their own cars. So staff's recommendation on this is that the application is complete. Everything that's required in the packet is in your packet, and we would recommend that the application be approved. And if there's any questions that you guys might have, you're sure welcome to ask.
Anybody have any questions for Darren?
Questions? Where's the garage? Where's their garage?
It's on the left side.
It's yep. So you can see Sunset Avenue there, and it's so if you come straight in, it's back there showing parking, and it comes straight in, I believe, from Sunset.
Thank you.
Okay.
Is that, are you that, or would you like to?
Joey, I think
Okay.
so. Joey, what is the for your alternates? Can they make comments during this time or ask questions? Okay, so yes, you can.
I was just going to ask, is the rental for the main house and the casita, or like two separate rentals, the main house and or the casita?
Yeah, if you look at it, it's an attached casita, I guess, if you want to call it that. I would call it more of a mother-in-law's quarters, because we do not allow nightly rentals in casitas or separate structures. Under the same roof. Yep. Yep.
So it's an attached casitas, right?
Correct. Yep. That's as per the code. That's what it states that it has to be.
Okay, is that all the questions? At this time, we will open up the public hearing for Stephanie and Mike Giddens. So public input is sought on a nightly rental application submitted by Stephanie and Mike Giddens located on tax ID number T-144-A-3. The zoning is agricultural A-1. If anybody would like to address this in the public hearing, please approach the microphone and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Would we make a motion on approval for that nightly rental?
On the one prior, yeah.
Okay. I don't know if we did that.
Is no other public comment? Okay, I would take a motion to close the public hearing.
I make a motion to close the public hearing on the Giddens nightly rental.
Okay,
I second that motion.
we have a motion and a second. We'll take a vote.
Aye.
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 Okay, now we can go back into this. What was your other question?
Say we didn't do an approval on that application, right?
Not yet, we're not there. We just did the public hearing and then we'll do,
I'm sorry.
okay. If we don't have any other discussion on that item, I would look for a motion or recommendation for that.
I recommend that we approve it and recommend it to the city council on the Giddens nightly rental.
Okay, we have a motion?
Second.
I'll second.
A motion and a second. We'll take a vote.
Aye.
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 Okay. This brings us down to business item F4, discussion on a zone change application submitted by Wasatch Commercial Builders. At this time, I'll let Darren talk about the zone change portion.
Okay. The applicant has submitted the application for a zone change from existing zoning is agricultural 1 acre. You brought it up. Thank you. The application is complete. They have submitted everything that they needed. We have verification. I think there was some questions that whether or not the applicant actually owned the property or had permission to from the property owner. They do own the property. They purchased it, and they are able to this application. I guess if you look at your folder, your permit, it basically there's the 9 criteria that you guys go through. I have gone through those, and I believe that as I review the general plan and the zone change application, I believe that it is in compliance with the general plan. The reasoning being is more so, and I love that they have also made application for the conceptual plan so that you can see what they are proposing. That's not right now, but I would like to, if Daisy could bring up is that okay with you, that we bring up that plan for the conceptual? If you can bring up the slope map, it has the layout on it. Well, maybe it's loading. Yeah. So the way I base that off of is I know that the general plan talks about medium density, low density, and different types of things. It has maps in there that everybody, if you're not familiar with those, you probably ought to get familiar with them. And the reason that I did this is if you look at their total overall acreage of the lots, you see there that they have lots that are 15,000, or not quite 15,000. Everything is above 15,000. Some go up as much as 63,000. And yes, some of them fall off on steep slopes. You see on there the green, and this is more for the, I'm not going to get into that right now. This is more for the conceptual plan, one of the requirements for that. But the green is a 30% or slope or greater. And the reason that I'm stating that they are in compliance with the, and we talk about it as to be low density. Goodness gracious. It sucks. So, and I guess maybe it's just my mild voice, but anyway, so what I did is I took the general overall acreage of all of the lots that they have that minuses out the roads, the different things such as that, and that comes out to be 27 acres. Their total acreage that they bought was 35 point something, 03 or something. And once you take that out, the lot acreage adds up to 27.23. Then they have some hillside there that they're not exactly sure what they're going to do at this point with, but that acreage there is probably going to come to the city in some form as acreage as well. So if you add all of that together, you're 27, you're about 30 acres of just lot density. And so when you take that 30 times 2, and they're asking for 57 lots, that's actually less. That's less than the half acre zoning, the R120. So that's why I felt that this would meet the general plan, the harmony of the general plan, because they didn't want to have just a cookie cutter lot. They were going to come in there and just do a bunch of homes that all looked a lot the same. They didn't want to have roads that were just big, long, straight, square things that you see in the tiny community housing. So they're trying to make some different things that way. They've also, and I'm getting ahead of myself because we'll talk about this in the concept plan, but that's why my recommendation is approval on this, is because of those reasons. And I don't know if you have some questions for me. You're more than welcome to ask them.
Questions for Darren on the zone change?
Yeah, I do. It goes against the general plan to have anything less than half acre lots, as in lots. So I don't know if you can build 4 or 5 1 acre lots and then crowd it clear down to R110 or something. But for me, It's just I am supposed to follow this and it does not meet the requirements of the general plan, in my opinion, because of number 9. It's half-inch lots. It's not mixed or.
Right. And so as we use the general plan as a guideline rather than code, and if you look at that, and we talked about that as well. So, but I guess if that direction is different than the general, if we want to just stick to the straight on zoning of R120, then each lot has 20,000 square feet. You're going to have different things. You won't have amenities. You won't have your those types of things. In my point of view, I would be what I stated. So.
How much of this property is 10% or greater? And into how much of the acre?
10% or greater. I couldn't tell you that. As for the zoning, they don't really require that. That's more of something we get into on the preliminary plat.
So I guess my question kind of goes along with that. And again, it's not necessary for this approval, but since they did show.
Yeah. Well, I had to show this because I didn't just want to give a blanket.
The hillside ordinance, at 30% or greater, development is not permitted. Yet there is several lots there that are taking in that 30%.
The hillside
greater.
ordinance only comes into play when it's going to be affected. So the zone change doesn't affect the hillside ordinance. So the hillside ordinance would be breached when someone wants to construct on that. So when we get into the next item, we can talk about that, that portion of it. But, so there's actual buildable areas on the lots that are presented that affect the discussion item of the zone change. But unless someone comes in and says they're going to disturb that 30% anyway, this particular 30% thing was man-made by UDOT. So how do you say a man-made object can't be changed either? So I think there's some criteria that's a little bit different in this one than we're dealing with an untouched natural slope on there. Just my opinion on that. I was reading the code 100 times on it, but I don't know if that helps answer your question. Kind of.
Kind of, but not.
Joey,
I'm not one way or the other. I'm just telling you, this is what I feel that the general is in harmony with the general plan. Because the general plan is the guiding document. It's not code.
Right.
Right. And so one of the things that we looked at as we went through this and as we went through page by page of the general plan, when we looked under the section that says zoning recommendations, it's actually on page 15 of the appendix. There's a part in there where part 1 says we're recommending these changes to these ordinances and codes. And this is based on survey, public input, public comment. But on here in part 2, it says recommendations based on general plan update. And when you get down there, there are 3 different items. And when you get to number 3, it says the recommendation is to revise the general residential zones to allow A, multi-generational housing on a single dwelling unit. B, disguised density, the multifamily housing designed to appear like single family. We suggest C, develop a mixed-use zone to accommodate higher densities in appropriate areas of the town. And D, to adopt a property maintenance ordinance. So when we flip through this and we see, and we're seeing that based on the acreage, based on the size, and then we see that one of the recommendations, because again, the general plan is not general plan as a recommendation, right? It's a guiding document. And so when we look at one of the recommendations that came from public input, and it says to help develop a mixed-use zone to accommodate higher densities in appropriate areas of the town, I'll just comment real quick. There was a lot there were lots of people that have approached us throughout my time here about saying, hey, and this is before Wasatch Builders, but saying, the city needs to buy more land around the cemetery, or the city needs to buy the triangle piece. We had actually talked the property owner long before Wasatch Builders was in the picture, and he was not interested in that. Even when we times that out, I mean, they have 35 acres that they purchased. For the city to do that, I mean, even if we tried to get that at $1,000 an acre, you can do the quick math, right? And one thing that we take into account when we do that, if we're trying to make some sort of a land purchase, a lot of people want it to stay ag land around the cemetery, but that would require a purchase by the city. So when we look at that, and when we actually look at, and we were going to go over this even in our budget hearing, that, you know, that when you actually divide that out, when you take someone's property tax, right, that everybody in Tokerville pays, and when you take that, 67% of property tax goes to the county, right, for the school district, and that 20% of Tokerville residents' taxes go to the Hurricane Valley Fire District. So only 13% of what's paid in tax actually comes back to Tokerville. And that's what we've got to try to do these purchases out of. While we do have high property taxes, we pay the second highest in the county. That comes out to $489 per person on average of your property tax that comes to Tokerville. So for the city to purchase these large tracts of land is not really feasible. I mean, we'd have to quadruple, you know, property tax. It's not feasible for the city to go out and buy 35 acres to keep that parcel ag land. That was one of the questions that I got in my office when this hit the public notice. That was a major one, is why didn't the city purchase that? And we were in negotiations. The price was way too high for us. So that was not an option. But then the next option, like we said, is to try to work with them to either help them, help develop this property in a way that's best for the city. If it can come out some way that we can work with them to get extra land for, a strip of extra, burial plots at the cemetery or something like that. But as we went through this, not only based on the acreage, also based on what this says on page 15 of the general plan to develop mixed use zone and accommodate higher densities in appropriate areas of the town. That's also part of what went into this staff recommendation. So
when you're looking at the appropriate areas of town, what do we take into the account of the historical nature of that? Most people in town have generations of family buried there. To me, that doesn't seem appropriate. We have plenty of other areas where we can meet our density requirements.
That's true.
Any historical, what are we looking at as far as the cemetery? I did look online and saw that it was historical, but it's, I don't know that it said monument. Does anybody have? But it's 200 years old, or approaching 200 years.
I know that anytime that somebody purchases property that's always been green belt and tries to change that zone, there's definitely, personal people. I have a son that's buried there myself, and do I going down there and sitting and realizing, looking across and looking over at Almond Heights? I don't think Almond Heights been there. All right. But that's just my own personal feeling. Now, that's not anything other than that. But if I, I'm not saying that anybody, because it becomes a very personal thing when you have loved ones that are buried there, or generations of people that are buried there. So as far as the historic landmark, I don't think it is that. Well, every cemetery in the state of Utah or in the country is historic in some nature.
I'd just like to say one more thing, that as we looked at this also, and we look at uses, if you look at our zoning map online, I know that the Tokerville Parkway, the bypass, has been very controversial, but obviously that parkway is going in, right? It's under construction. If you look on our zoning map and you look down below what would be the proposed Ash Bluff, you will see that that is actually zoned highway commercial. So all sorts of things are permitted in highway commercial, right? Whether it's going to be People could propose RV parks, they could propose little stores, they could propose all sorts of things. So when I look at Ash Bluff potentially putting high-end homes around that cemetery, that's a better border for me than looking off at highway commercial. So, I mean, so yeah, again, I mean, it's not up to us, but as far as staff recommendation, we took into account a lot of things. That's that. So if you,
Not on this map.
yeah, it's.
So this is.
But the zoning map's online, and it's down at the bottom.
The applicant would like to address the commission with anything on the zone change. We can do that at this time.
Sure. Let's stand over here and yell.
You-
I might have a better chance. To address the most recent comment. Oh, sorry, but Josh Lyon with Wasatch. So I have a few generations in that cemetery. Grew up here locally. The general plan alludes heavily, and I actually have that drawing that Afton was discussing. So the red is that highway commercial. If you can see it, I'm not sure, but then you have that circle is the property itself that's sitting at the end, proposing that the future that becomes residential. That's in the general plan. Yeah, certainly. Certainly. So the general plan in the 2017 amendment goes over multiple different items that discuss this area being an area that the city foresees growing. So they talk about Choya Creek, Almond Heights, the trails, you have Tokerville Heights. All of these areas are more of a residential built up community areas. They're staying away from the original historic downtown of Tokerville, especially with that bypass road going in. The residential plan is to, build out the residential in the south. So for general plan reasons, it fits the idea, and even in this plan itself showing that we plan for this to be residential. As far as, the zone being the R115, I think everybody's familiar with the current state of the market. Like Afton alluded to, this property is not cheap. So to be able to afford this, the general plan states heavily that this is designed for the people of Tokerville that grew up in Tokerville, but for their family members as well. As a member of a family in Tokerville, it's out of my league. They can't afford to live here, and if properties continue to be half acre plus, no matter where they're located, then the youth of tomorrow, so to speak, will never live in Tokerville. I left Tokerville after school, and I've been clawing ever since to get back here. So as soon as I can afford it, and there's a to be here, then I would be back here. So just speaking to the lot sizing, these lots, like they mentioned, the minimum is 15, which is a third of an acre. So with the current market, the way that it is, a third of an acre is still not a piece of property that's going to be easily obtained. Also, the size of lots, to this half acre, it becomes a general rule that we're half acre and half acre only, but you drive around and a half acre just means more water to support the half acre for those that are taking care of it. And then those that are not taking care of it, it's just more room to grow weeds. So more room to park things in the yard, more room to overload those half acres. So I think there's a lot of benefits, especially now with the current market, the current water situation, in getting these lots, to a third acre. And the lots that are on this that are at a third, almost half of these lots are over that half acre designation already. It's just easing into a little bit higher to the medium density so that there's more lots available in Tokerville. Everyone wants to be here. It's a beautiful place, it's a beautiful location, and the views are going to be amazing. So, and I've, speaking to the cemetery, I don't know if this is even appropriate to ask, but, if not residential, the people there, I've grown up, I moved to Hurricane and there's housing around every cemetery. So everywhere I've seen, there's housing around cemeteries. So if not housing, what's appropriate to be there if historically it's a cemetery? It's just to leave it ag forever. So that's the thought. But that's my comments.
And then there was one specific question, Austin Overman with Wasatch. There was a question in regards to the 30% grade. And the lots that have that 30% grade in it, there's a half acre or more of buildable area on all those, I believe.
Yeah, and thanks for bringing that up. I meant to discuss that even on those lots with high slopes, those slopes, the intent is to leave them as they are, as Joey has mentioned, Commissioner Campbell, that those are previously disturbed. So I think the sensitive lands ordinance brings in previously disturbed issues. But those are previously disturbed, but without the slope being a portion of that lot, there's still a lot of lot and enough lot available to build a home on. If, an arrangement or an agreement or discussion with the city is that we'd like to, put an intent to that land other than portioning to the lots, we're open to that conversation.
Thank you. Okay, at this time, I'd like to go through the criteria. On the R115 single family zone change here. So number one, does it address a recognized and demonstrated need in the community? And as we're going through these items, we can make them long discussion, short discussion, easy discussion, but obviously my thoughts on that is that we do need some more housing in Tokerville, right? We need something that may be more affordable.
Yes.
To me, when anybody talks
coming in.
we do. To me, when anybody talks about half acre and third acre lots, it still doesn't mean affordable to me because they're still expensive. Number two, will be compatible with the character of the neighborhood and the surrounding structures in use, scale, mass, and circulation. When I look at that, I think that when I look at Trail Ridge has smaller lots. Choya Creek has larger lots. I think it probably meets the surrounding structures. Everybody else feel the
I'd
same?
like to go back to item number one.
Okay, sorry.
Addresses recognized and demonstrated need in the community. I know we talked about affordable housing and you just made the comment that third acres are still not affordable. And so then I think, well, is this demonstrating the need for the community? And I think a community needs to have those cultural areas, those areas that are protected, that the locals can enjoy. And I know that place has been a sacred spot for a lot of people for many, many years. So I would argue that number one, it doesn't recognize a demonstrated need. It's actually taking away from something that people love about this town. And that's the ability to go in and sit at a gravesite, enjoy their loved ones while their memories and things like that, without having kids jumping on trampolines next door or those kinds of things. To his comment earlier about cemeteries being in the middle of cities, typically they are, and I agree with that, but they don't have a single road that drives right through all of the community to get to the entrance of the cemetery. Typically they're on a wider road, something that you drive straight through, and it's not somebody I have to drive through neighborhoods. I'm imagining having limousines driving down the road, passing everybody's kids playing out in the
I actually would like to comment just for a second because I understand what you're saying about that. But if you look at Tonnequint Cemetery in St. George, the All Abilities Park shares driveways with it. I mean, it's Thunder Junction. It has a train. So, I mean, we're not, I'm just saying, as we're looking through. Right. And that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
So
Can you go back on that screen where the lots are, the layout? Show me that road. So we access the cemetery off two spots there.
Well, we got to kind of separate that map right now because what we're talking about is zone change. This is kind of the concept that they're going to come up to next. But this definitely helps us because they show that they have bigger lots that they're going to do with smaller lots and stuff like that. But we can't really make our recommendation off this. It's great to have it, And we need to have it. If someone came in here and just said, I want an R115 zone change without having something like that, everybody probably just laugh, right? But, so when we come back to the concept, will we get to your question, or is it?
I have a lot of questions, but we got to get to them.
So we'll keep going here. So number 3, will not result in an over intense use of the land or excessive depletion of natural resources. Does anybody have any comments on that one?
I don't see how it's going to do that.
Will not have a material adverse effect on community capital improvements program. I don't think the city's paying for it, so. Will not require a level of community facilities and service greater than that which is available. I think, any comments on that one? Will not result in undue traffic congestion and traffic hazards.
I have a question about that one.
Okay.
Because of where the road comes out on the main road, Toker Boulevard, is that going to be hazardous to be pulling out?
Chairman, do you want me to answer that? So in our, we still got one more phase. We got preliminary plat still, but after preliminary plat, if it's deemed to go forward with this, there are construction drawings, and their UDOT will require acceleration lanes, deceleration lanes to make that a whole lot safer than it is right now, because right now there is a blind or a bad, we talk about historic and who allowed such a dangerous, unfortunately we've had fatalities right there because of that, so that's a kind of a fitting place for a cemetery, I guess, right? We got a place for people, but so in their approval process of this, they will be required to meet with UDOT. UDOT will have certain regulations with them. And if that doesn't happen before the bypass road goes through, Tokerville City will have those same types of requirements. We will want to have some sort of a widening there for people to get out of the way that are trying to go into there from heading south. And then also for people that are heading to the north, we'd want a turn lane of some sort there. It's a little bit of widening.
Traffic trying to go around them.
Okay. So, that's one of the things that we would require definitely is we want to make that, look at the layout there. That layout is coming 90 degrees to the freeway or the highway there. That's a whole better scenario than that skewed angle that there's there now. There's a benefit, I guess, if you want to think of one.
You got one? Okay.
So some people are popular than the other people, and I've seen 300 cars up there, and you can't accommodate that. They're going to be parking all over Wasatch streets because you've only got 3 alleys in there to park, and nobody parks perfect, so you're going to have a congestion problem with that. Right on that road and parking in front of people's houses. And there's no way to get around that.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe 2 cars, but some of these people have hundreds and hundreds of cars.
So it looks like on the south end there, those are parking places for the cemetery. Is that correct?
A little bit.
South and on the
But not-
north end.
But you're right, there's going to end up being, and I guess that if somebody wants to buy a house next to a cemetery, they're going to have to expect.
That was
But
one of my
there's going to
comments
be-
in
They're going to have to live with it because they'll be calling here and wanting these people to move their cars.
Right.
Yeah, and I think the other thing to think about when it does get further down the road to like preliminary is making the cross sections the minimum of the 50, because then you can have parking and have that, if
Better than before because they're coming in on the right.
With the deceleration lanes and how.
the other thing too is once somebody blocks the road, then you don't get like if someone blocks the south end of the road, now you can actually come around and enter it from both directions to where you can actually fit more cars in the cemetery.
True.
Did you have an addition? for that?
I did. As it currently is, there's not a whole lot of parking inside or out, correct? We are really hoping to accommodate some parking, not only having the additional entrance, but having some additional parking as well outside of those entrances. So you can kind of make that out on the drawing on both sides, on the south and the north. So we're hoping to accommodate some extra space for that as well.
Well, and plus, usually when you have a huge amount of cars, it's during the middle of the day. So it's usually, and it usually is not a long time. So,
Right. I live basically stone's throw from my town cemetery, and there are some times where there's been some cars parked out there. That was kind of part of the deal that we knew that we were getting into.
Well, we're not quite for the public hearing yet. We'll get to public hearing.
So the secondary on this, so there's got to be a way in and a way out. Does that not, are they planning on doing a widening of there also in turning lanes?
Well, that's kind of on the next conceptual, but
Yeah,
yes,
that-
they are. They've got a secondary emergency access proposed over there. And I'm not sure, this is really way preliminary.
Right, I understand that.
Whether this is so conceptual, things can change from this depending on your guys' comments in the next step. But as far as design of the entrance, I don't know exactly. I've heard a couple different things, and you guys will have to talk to that. I don't know.
So we've spoken with, step one, we speak with the fire marshal. And so we've got code and everything nailed down. And again, we can dive into a lot of this stuff with the site plan, but we've planned that secondary, emergency egress. It meets fire code. It's an all-weather surface, but the entrance itself, like was previously mentioned, it's all got to be up to UDOT standard. And I'm not sure if it's not a done deal or not, but at the timing of that bypass road, this becomes a City of Tokerville street. You're no longer pulling out onto a state route highway. You're pulling onto a City of Tokerville highway. So you're going to have a UDOT standard in your Tokerville city street. So egress and ingress is going to be, like you say, we're going to have to widen the roads. We're going to have to add a turn lane to turn left in. You're going to have an acceleration lane to get out, and you're going to have a deceleration lane to approach the property.
Okay, that'll take us to will not cause significant air, odor, water, light, or noise pollution. Any comment? Safety or welfare of the present or future inhabitants of the city. Anything on that one? And will meet the requirements of the general plans. I guess that's where some of them are already coming back on the questions is the general plan.
I read through everything, the codes and everything, and there's nothing that tells me you can determine the square footage of all the lots and divide it into the lots you want and justify that. I'm looking at public input on this, and one of the 48% of the people will read about the size of lots.
Can I comment to that?
Let me finish, Josh. So a little new here, but this is guiding me to half-acre lots. This is telling me half-acre lots. I know the general plan, but I'm not willing to, or know if I'm willing to start altering the general plan that we spent a long time designing, because that's kind of what the public wanted. I mean, half acres isn't a crime.
Well, the one
It
thing,
actually works pretty good.
one comment I have on that is we have, this whole downtown district is R112, right? And
It is.
we did a new subdivision, I can't remember, Toker Hills 1 through 4, which is a mix of R112, R120. I don't know of any, there's a fair amount of R112 in Tokerville, right?
There is.
So
There's a lot.
the precedence has been set. Right?
But that's a different zone. Before this was created in 2017, that all happened way before that. 1969, we had little teeny lots. I'm wanting to know if you're asking me to disregard the requirements of the general plan.
That's why we all interpreted it. That's why there's 5 of us.
That's why I interpret it. There's no other way to interpret it. I just thought about this and thought about it and thought about it.
However, I think we do need to, this isn't going with small lots. It's going with just, half acre lots and just a little smaller. So I think we also need to keep an open mind there, because we do have some stipulations that as a city, we are supposed to provide smaller lots. I would lots rather see something like this than a bunch of small lots.
Well, we have zoning for that. Medium density areas for under half acres. We
Okay.
have that. So are we gonna move that into this zone? Or are we gonna leave the zones where they're at? Because you'll have plenty of room looking at the medium density. That's a lot of area you got zoned for that. There's a lot of little houses you can put in there. So it's just a matter of how we want to look at it and what do you want there? Across the street, across the river, there's all 1 acres.
If I did
This
the
way,
math
it's
right,
all-
if I did the math right and they went to R160, what we're discussing here is 4 lots. They would have to drop 4 lots off this subdivision to make it all R120. If you
I
take
don't
the,
think they're not far off. It appears to me if they move some of them 90 footers to 100 footers, you might lose 2 there and they might get that. Darren probably has more, he's done a lot of those calculations. I'll bet you on that.
I don't know what the applicant's done. We've, as we look at the general plan, if you look at the appendix here, I think it's the appendix. You look at the map on page 16. It just calls it out as single family. It shows the single family residential medium density is what's downtown. We're R112. That's medium. That's medium density. We go from medium density to low density, and they're on most of their lots, they're above that. But as far as trying to get all of it to be R120, I don't know how many lots they would lose. They would have to go back and do calculations for their engineer and things such as that. But
I think the first design we saw was like, there was only 4 lots less in the PSR.
yeah, so
One of the not concerns, but we did have the R120 when we came in and we looked at it, but some of the, concessions, so to speak, that we worked out was on when we get to the concept layout, there's a road that one of the big focuses on connectivity and traffic flow in Tokerville. So one thing that we did, a concession, was we eliminated lot 2, add an access road going north for possible future development. Because we're going to create this, island of development. Choi has created an island, Trails have created an island, and it will continue to be islands unless there's future connectivity planned for. So when we redid our site plan and added that future connectivity, that reconfigured our lot layout. So some of those islands, instead of all being street facing, would have odd, weird slivers to them. So that's when the 15 came into play. But Commissioner Campbell, you're correct. It's not far off on the amount of lots. It's just the configuration. And again, going back to some of those comments with water usage, affordability, and, unfortunately and sadly, affordability is a different number today than it was. But from 20 to 15, it's also a different number.
And there was something factoring in, with the consideration of giving the parking, and, we're looking at turning over some of it for the cemetery itself. And, a lot of those things are obviously a lot more difficult as we have to get extra creative on lots, whereas these by and large follow the plan.
We want to talk before we open the public hearing?
Let's hear what they say.
Okay, so at this time, we'll open the public hearing for a zone change application submitted by Wasatch Commercial Builders for tax ID number T. Current zoning is agricultural. Zoning is R-1. 115, single family. Please state your name and address at the microphone, and please keep your comments to 3 minutes. We have one up there already.
Anita Eaton, 290 South Ash Creek Drive, in Tokerville. When this was first added or brought up was just for a zone change. There's these questions that came to mind were, and knowing the piece of property is, how does it account for the hillside ordinance? Also a secondary access into this location. Having gone through the process of my family, both of a subdivision, the one that I live in, and future subdivisions, there needs to be a secondary access. And that has to be something that is accessible for all vehicles, just one that is, well, anyway, secondary access, especially on the potential for the lots. This piece of property is 35 acres in size. Even if you were to take it at half-acre lots, though it's third acre lots, and use the difference between half-acre and third acre for the infrastructure of roads, sidewalks, and other access points, you're still looking at the potential, if this was a flat piece of ground, of 70 building lots, if it had been half acres. Other items of consideration, since this is still a highway, it will still be a highway until there is an adjustment made between the bypass road and this highway. And also there's been consideration of putting in a turning lane there to access Cholla Creek subdivision area, which also has the approximate about 66 to 68 homes as well. And so just looking at the density of homes and the count of cars that would go into those homes, there needs to be something for turning lanes. That is a future thing on that. I'm not opposed to a not opposed to a zone change. I know that there is a lot of property inside of Tokerville itself, having been being a owner of someone who has property that is residential, which was, as long as I'm alive, other members of my family are alive, it will never become residential property. It will remain as agricultural property. The zone changed doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to have homes placed on it. But if I were buying property today, I would definitely want to recoup my investment and make it the best it could be. But I am concerned about this area because of those items there. The hillside, the turning lanes off of UDOT, the secondary access. Thank you.
My name is Randy Scott. I live at 48 West Old Church Road, a stone's throw from here. A couple of quick questions. They talk about affordable housing. What is the guesstimation of these lots as far as a price? And then the other thing would be water. Where are you getting water?
We can answer after the public hearing's over if you'd like.
Okay. I'll put a check mark on
It's like nobody's taking notes.
Hi, I'm Van Kleinman. I actually own the property just adjacent to this on the north. I'm not here opposed to making a zone change, but I do want to go on the record. I plan to continue to farm that property to the north. As you know, in Tokerville, we have wind almost every day. And it normally blows from the north to the south. And I use chemicals on that property. I also irrigate it. I can irrigate 2 days a week. If it's blowing on one of those days, when that next day comes, I'm going to have to irrigate. Last Tuesday was one of those days that I had to irrigate, and I was blowing water at least 40 to 50 feet onto that property. The second thing is that at least twice a year, I wean calves down on that property. And going to have 10 to 15 mother cows and 10 to 15 calves that are going to beller for 24/7. I just don't want the city to call me up and tell me that somebody's windows are wet because I had to irrigate and the north wind was blowing, or that some bushes got ruined because some chemicals got blown onto them. And from what I see, you're backing lots right up to my property line. And so there needs to be a bigger buffer because as long as I'm alive, I plan to continue to farm that. The LLC that we have set up says that as long as any member wants to farm it, the land will not be sold. And so I can see into the foreseeable future that this property will be used for agriculture. And while I'm not opposing the zone change, as a planning committee, I think you need to protect my rights when you start looking at how you're going to lay out that development. And there needs to be a bigger buffer between my property line and the property line of these lots.
Dan Catlin, 821 South Peachtree. I also own the plot that's bordering your line there. I usually like arguing against contractors, especially since I was born and raised in West Valley. So I was actually happy to see them come in at R115 rather than R112, which when I was on the commission, we got a lot of R112s coming in. This is coming in as a simple subdivision, I assume? Right. So yeah, it's under item F, simple subdivision, right? So just a couple of concerns. I know on the MPDO, we put in a thing where if you're going in next to an existing community residential area, that if you're going smaller than the existing lots, provide a buffer zone, which meant R120 right on the other side. It's R120 right on the other side of that. And if we kind of implied the same thing on the simple subdivision, that first run of houses on Ash Creek would be R120 to provide the buffer going into it. I know it's fun talking about the conceptual, but we're not to that point yet. I echo Mrs. Eaton's comments on her concerns. I think they're very valid. And when we get to the conceptual also, whenever we put in a small subdivision with nearly that many homes in it, they've had a small park of some type going in with it. They're on an island there with a highway with kids. So I would recommend something to be considered on
that. Before my time starts, can I see that zone? I don't understand that future zone map. Can you show that and describe that to me, please? That red. Oh. So so it's zoned agricultural right now, right? There is no highway commercial zoning on this property. Okay. All right. So I just want to make. Okay. So I just want to make sure. So there's no concern of this becoming highway commercial. This has no right to be. It's not planned to be. There's no concern of that. Okay. All right. I just wanted to make sure there was no possibility of this being highway commercial. Okay. Good. Thank you. So just in the first question that you have, is there a need for more housing? I would just ask, why in the world do we need more housing? We've got 6,500 homes going in right away. We have housing all over the place. We might need more affordable housing, but this is not going to be affordable housing by any stretch of the imagination. And we do not need any more housing in this place.
Hey, this is Alex Trujillo. I live in Peachtree, 746. And I was just following some threads, and I know it's not necessarily official in Facebook, but is obviously the concern of the community, especially which the first point that you were reading is something that the community wants. And it's not something necessarily that Tuckerville citizens want in there. Now, the other point was, well, do you guys want housing instead of commercial? Until that point, you sell it to me. I will hate being housing, but I will hate more being commercial. But if that is not planning to be commercial anytime soon, it doesn't necessarily need to be housing if the Tocqueville citizens don't want to. So, thank you.
I'm DC Young. I live at 1195 South Western Road. My house directly is off of Ash Creek to this development, and I consider myself the prime instigator of problems down that way because I was the first house in Ash Creek 2 subdivision that some people don't like. That's fine. I know and have talked with the previous owner of this property from the moment that I bought the property. He assured me that he had no intention of ever developing it, but if the time came and he sold it, he would be sad to see that it got developed. And we certainly have enjoyed looking across the Ash Creek cliffs and past the lava fields and watching the cattle as they develop. That's been a nice thing. I took the liberty to calling Mr. Scott Overman, the current owner and developer of Wasatch Builders, and these gentlemen who don't work for him, I think. And he assured me that whatever was going to be put here was going to be upscale housing. And he used that word, upscale. What I saw on the plat, I wouldn't consider to be upscale. If we're trying to make affordable housing out of these lots, we're wasting our time. And this, in my opinion, this body is not in charge of how much lots are costing. You're not going to change things. The economy will change things. We need to worry about the way City Tocqueville looks in spite of whatever else anybody says about the economy or need for affordable housing. Yes, we need affordable housing. Yes, it can be in a lot of places in Tocqueville, but should it be here? My main view is looking right into this lot, the main view of my home. And I spent 15 years enjoying it. And I would be looking at 5 homes directly across from me. 5 residences directly across from my lot. It would be my instant view. Looking down on that. Now, the majority of the rest of Tocqueville, all the homes are not going to be seeing these homes the way the landscape is. But Mr. Wallace and Mr. Schweringen and Mr. Lee and Mr. Young are, because our homes look down on that property, on the lower portion of that property.
3 minutes.
I know. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any public comments for the zone change?
One thing I should have added, I understand the builders need to develop, and I understand their right to do that. I support that right. I just think it's just a little bit busy.
You know, I've lived here at Lance Scoobler, 704 South Mesa View Drive. I lived in this community for 32 years. I've worked with the city for the last 14 years. And for 14 years, I've heard about affordable housing, self-help homes and all this. When self-help come in, everybody threw a fit. And those are some of the nicest homes and the nicest neighborhood, and the people that they brought are some of the nicest people I've ever met. The people that are moving here are coming here for a reason. And for us to say, yeah, you can come, but nobody else come, I think is pretty selfish. And this 1,500 square feet acreage meets our criteria. It met the 9 standards that are right there. That is your job. Does it meet what the city says it should meet? And it does. You can argue, but black and white, it meets it. There may be some gray areas. But somewhere we have to have affordable housing. I have a daughter that is a school teacher. She can't afford a house in Tocqueville, but she wants to. But it seems like this community wants to put up a boundary. When you say affordable housing, what else you want to call it? These people want to come here. It's the people. So you say, but only those who live here now, nobody else. And it just frustrates me that we as a community pride ourselves on being open to everybody to come. Come, we need you, we want you. But yet, when they come, we do this to them. And it just irritates me. And I understand people. I got Airbnbs around me. I hate them. But people have a right to survive and to live. And they have a right to come. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Anyone else for public hearing?
I'm Jane Scott. I live at 48 West Old Church Road. There's a lot of different things that have been brought up that I caught my attention I hadn't thought about. I can't imagine, all those cars coming in through that area to go to a funeral, so often. I just can't see that going down a residential area. It seems a little bit too much to me. I wonder let's go back a little bit. Years ago, the city council, they came up with a plan, whatever, that we would have an historical district here in downtown Tocqueville. And about 2011, to my surprise, in the midst of a very busy time of life with my kids in high school and middle school, etc., whatever it was busy time. We got curb and gutter, and we were told, well, the roadway will crumble on the edges and it won't be good. You got to have curb and gutter. And I think, well, how did we ever last this long without? And I could be mistaken, but we were married in 1974. I'm pretty sure the asphalt that ran in front of my home was the same asphalt we walked up and down when we were going to our reception. There was a pothole in the road that was pretty bad and was neglected for years. And so I think everybody thought, well, it's just roads coming apart, but it really wasn't. So we got curb and gutter, and I thought, well, gee, just like the big city now, so much for historical. I'm feeling hysterical. No, but not quite, but yeah. But when I think about why do people come to Tocqueville, I think they like the feel. They like seeing the little pasture that Anita has over there, a little green here. It's kind of connected to the historical part of town. I mean, and going south to see a pasture, I love it. It breathes life into me. And there's little here and there. It's not a lot, but it defines our character, I think. If we just keep covering everything up and subdividing, it's going to lose a lot, what people want. And I just think the people who came here, because they loved it, they felt the peacefulness. Anyway, you got the gist of it.
Anyone else? Okay, we got 3 emails that we would like to read in. Start with Sean.
This is John. I am writing this email in regards to the zone change request for the property next to the cemetery. Unfortunately, I am unable to attend in person this evening. My name is John Clayton, and I own the property located at 1245 South Tocqueville. Toker Boulevard. I oppose the move and ask the council board not to approve the zone change. After reviewing the details of the subjected future plan, the new homes would increase traffic substantially on the boulevard and particularly directly across the street from my driveway easement. The bypass road has recently started and was finally going to help eliminate all the heavy traffic on the boulevard. With this development, it will change that and keep a heavy flow of traffic on the main boulevard, and furthermore, make it even more difficult to turn into our driveways across the street from the cemetery. My second concern with this development is not only the future construction noise, but also having all these homes built up looking directly over my home and my immediate fellow neighbors. I please ask that you take these issues into consideration. Thank you, John.
Okay, mine is to whom it may concern, I'm writing I'm writing to oppose the zoning change. My name is McKell Croft and I live at 1245 South Toker Boulevard with my husband, John, and our 2 kids. I believe developing housing around the cemetery would diminish the small agricultural field of Tokerville, especially in a place that is so sacred to the town, the cemetery. As of now, it's a quiet place to sit, surrounded by a large housing development full of barking dogs, and blocking any peaceful view would absolutely ruin that. The town doesn't have, nor should have, the infrastructure to support so much growth. There is a reason the residents live here, because it is a small, quiet, and away from large, dense housing developments. It is so sad to see so much beautiful pasture turned over to make a quick buck. Thanks for your time, McKell Croft.
Got one from Brian's Religion. Woody.
Springer.
I respect the landowner's right to sell the property and any owner's right to develop. Perhaps yet another rezoning decision should be postponed until the impact of the new bypass road and the associated Sun River Toker Hills development are fully realized and its actual effect on our community is understood. That said, I have questions and concerns with regards to the following. Housing density. Is the proposal for high density lots or 1/2 acre to full acre lots? Question. With minimum footprint or square foot home sizes? Will there be condos included? How many stories are allowed? Would this development occur before the conjunction with or after Toker Hills? Access. The current SR 17 is already busy. Are plans included for a second access point or turn lanes, or is it assumed that the new bypass, new SR 17, will alleviate traffic and allow Toker Boulevard to have 50-mile-an-hour speed reduced? Number 3, how does the city intend to address the already limited availability of water, the lack of dedicated police presence, and city ordinance enforcement, i.e. no enforcement of the Westfield Street parking change? Thank you, Brian.
Any other public comments for the public hearing portion of the R115 zone change? Okay, I would take a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll make a motion to close public hearing.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. We'll vote.
Aye.
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 Okay, I can answer a couple of the questions, and I can't really answer the question about affordable homes, though. That's a whole different discussion that if you would like to come and visit with Afton, she's great at that. Yeah, and I'm going to throw you under the bus for that. Yeah, and I can just respond, and we can't really answer to that, but the water issue, and I'm guessing some people can already say that, is I'm guessing that field takes way more water than all the residential units combined. Agriculture usually eats way more water, and that's pulled right out of our water system right now. So the water that's going into this location is probably going to be reduced by a fair amount if it turns to residential. So let's see. Do we have any more comments from the commissioners for this? Have we got any more discussion items on it?
Well, we've sure heard a lot.
Yeah.
It's sure contradicting for me.
The other comment that I would like to say is that the Planning Commission is a recommending body. So we're going to recommend, our recommend is based off the code if it fits the code, we're going to make our recommendation. It's not off of whether we like it or not. So with that being said, I would say that your best place to make your voice heard is at the city council, because they can make this decision. They can say yes or no. We're a recommending body, not a decision-making body. So make sure you go to city council. Okay. It will be the first week of next month.
First Wednesday,
For discussion item,
Yeah, public hearing will be the
third weekend.
depending on how the vote goes.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Well, it'll still be there. Yeah.
Yes, it will still be there. Yes. Yes, you're correct.
Okay. Well, if we don't have any more discussion, I'd be ready to take a motion. They're always controversial.
I'll dare make a motion to recommend approval of R115 for this parcel for, where's it, 4?
Yep.
F4. Because I do believe it falls into the plan and everything else. I don't necessarily, well, doesn't matter, we make the motion. Make that motion to approve F4.
Recommend approval.
Recommend approval, sorry.
Okay, we have a motion.
I second it.
A motion and a second. We'll vote on it.
Aye. Nay.
Aye.
Nay.
Aye.
Okay, that closes that section of the business items. That'll take us to discussion on a conceptual site plan submitted by Wasatch County or Commercial Builders, tax ID D-1. There's no public comment on this, and no public hearing was posted on it, but we will have Darren submit or give us all the rundown on this. And then what we'll do is go through the standard for review.
All righty. On this next one, as Joey, as the chairman, talked about, there is really no formal motion on this. This is basically to give this the concept plan. So if we're going to pull that, let's pull up just the concept plan without the slope map on it. The applicant has met all of the requirements as per the code. This is not right now in Tocqueville's current applications, there is not an application for a conceptual approval, but what it is, in the code, it states that there needs to be a conceptual submitted before preliminary, and so it goes before the planning commission and then the city council, but it's for discussion. And those discussion items we take back to the developer from both the planning commission and then the city council, and based on those types of things. So in essence, in my staff comments, I have items 1 through 9 that are kind of the almost checklist that's in the code. And if you review that, the concept plan, it currently it doesn't have that application, like I said, but it's part of the process as per the code, as the subdivision code. So in there, I don't want to go through all of the steps or the check marks, because I have already done that. I've gone over that with Joey as well. They've submitted everything that the code is asking for in its entirety. The staff's recommendation on this one is basically approval, basically on the same things that we talked about with the zone change. But there's some things that I did want to talk about that the applicant, when they first came in, they had some very conceptual drawings. We sat down and we talked about a number of things to help bring this back into code. So one of the reasons that you're seeing the connection to the south side of the cemetery is to help connectivity. We talk about in our general plan how the city wants to have connectivity between subdivisions. We want to be able to have the things for our kids and different things. We also talked about the secondary access. We years and years ago, back when I was on Planning Commission, we required Trail Ridge Estates to have a second access. If you tell me where that second access is today, and they've gone into 4 or 5 different phases of that. I can tell you where it was supposed to be years ago. It was supposed to go through the Interstate Rocks gravel pit, which is closed off. And I feel like this applicant here is giving, we asked them to do some just conceptual profiles of what that road would look like, or that access coming down off the hillside on the south end. They had about a 150 foot, I think it was, of a steeper slope than 12%. Our code allows for a 12% grade. So it has a little tiny bit. And engineering work, that is very acceptable. We talked also about what we wanted that to be. Did we want it to be an emergency access, or would that to be something that somebody's always using? We also talked about different design aspects of what that would look like. Also, one of their very preliminary layouts that they had and gave to us was the parking on the north side and the south side, trying to accommodate for something more than just street parking for patrons. I've been to a number of funerals myself there that I parked clear on the north side, or the south side, I mean, inside the cemetery on the dirt roads. There's a lot of parking in there, and we all know that is possible. But at the same time, it also gives you, if you did park on the south side, you don't have to wait for everybody in the middle to get out of the way. You could pop out on the south, and we can open that side up. There's a lot of details still in the design process, and they realize that. You've still got preliminary plat approval that will be coming if this council, I guess, at this point, and because, like I said, this conceptual is not necessarily approval. It's more of a nod of the head that we are, generally, and we're giving staff the ability to work with the developers and continue to go forward in a positive direction. So that's kind of the long story of where we are at this point. So, and I don't know if you have any questions. If you want some questions on that design we didn't answer in our zoning comments.
I have some questions, if I may.
Definitely, this is the time.
So I just made that motion, but I don't agree with this plat.
Okay.
I don't think we should be doing developments with just a fire exit. I think there should be 2 exits, two accesses to full-time accesses to the development. That's probably my biggest hang up with this plat.
I guess we got that on my pen. Sorry, I cut up here and went, oh. All right. Well, because this is what this meeting's about, is planning commissioners. We would like to know your input on what's designed currently. Like we say, this is conceptual. It's not final. Oh, we want to take that, and then
Separate the two. I think we have every right to have an R115. I just don't agree with this plat.
Right.
Can you tell me or what the code says, or for that secondary access and percentages?
Where it's found in the code is in the roads, and I think it's in the road section. It just talks about it. It merely just says a secondary access. It doesn't say what it needs to be. And that's why a lot of the other subdivisions have been developed with a dirt road. I believe that they are planning on doing I think it's a 15 foot, 20 foot, 20 foot wide with asphalt. And they wanted to doll it up, but they don't want their subdivision looking like, take care of the scar, because there'll be a little bit of scar coming down the hillside and these spoils on the downhill sides. Definitely with that landscape, that if needed, there might be a small retaining. I can't really speak for them at this point, but as they design this subdivision and we see what those cuts and fills will be on different coming down off of there, they're definitely wanting to do that. There again, if they do this while it's under UDOT's rule, UDOT will have certain requirements for them to have that access there. So
One thing I thought with that secondary access, and there's been some comment on it, is that maybe on the first, 100 feet or whatever it is, or maybe not even that, 50 feet, they can make it wide enough and put a small parking there. And, like then you can have a little park there or something, because when that turns to a city street, it's going to be down to 25 mile an hour. So that's kind of wasted land. It might do something to
if they, I'm just there again. I think that Josh and his partner here could probably speak better to that. But there's a big parcel right there in the middle that's on that hill, which is not buildable. Either on their, I can't see the red line on there. There's a red line on one of them. I thought it was on that, but it shows the top of that 30% grade. Basically they're not going to be able to build anywhere on those hillside at all. And they have to stay a certain footage away from those, as well as Dan Catlin was talking about. There's those things will do that. There's a possibility of using some of that area. If you could scroll to the left, just see that bigger, to the south, go the other way. I'm sorry. The other right. Okay. The other left. Thanks. No, you're good. Sorry. Keep going. So you see that right there, it says hillside area. Don't know what the developer's idea is, what he wants to do there, what they want to do there, but that whole side could become Tocqueville Cities at one time or another. Who knows exactly? And like you're saying, there probably could possibly be some sort of a area donated to Tocqueville City that we could improve as a park. I didn't. All right. But anyway, so these are things that we will definitely take back to the table with the developer and talk about. They're here, obviously they can hear.
Darren, can they actually build a road on your hillside ordinance on that hillside?
Well, and we would say no, because if it hadn't already been disturbed, it's already been cut right through that area. UDOT, when it came in, and if you remember those years ago, it's probably been close to 25 years ago, they came in and cut that whole hillside off. Then back in the day, he was like, I don't know why he let them do that, but if you remember, for 15 years, that was so scarred. And so every time the wind blew, and it's taken 20 years to rehabilitate there, definitely. Well, the best that weeds and a tree. Well, you've got a couple of trees there, and I have not. Well, the only reason. Yeah. So, that's probably runoff water from Than's irrigation, I would imagine, that lets those grow. So, yeah, definitely. There are some things like that, but those are the things we're going to need to deal with, and definitely ask of the developer and his engineers.
Okay. Does anybody
Yes.
have any questions?
Oh, you're.
Oh, and sorry, no, go ahead.
Not really. And I don't know if this is the right place to do it, but the road coming up, have you considered, or have there been discussions about making it wide enough? Because you had brought up, Sean, kind of going into a cemetery through a residential zone. If they did that secondary exit as more of a road, you would be coming in from the highway, not through the entire neighborhood. Another question, I'll just list them off and we can chat, but are the roads wide enough? Because I don't know what standard road sizes are, but are they wide enough to accommodate parking on both sides of the residential neighborhoods to allow for?
They're proposing 50-foot wide road right now, which is the residential standard. It's one of those residential standards. I used to work for a city previously that their standards are are significantly small.
Yeah, we've not seen some of those. That's why I wondered.
50 over there is almost, you're almost getting into your
Highway.
secondary corridor.
Okay. Thanks. I didn't go measure it when I drove through. On your red line here, because that looks like that's cutting through all the properties. So the lots kind of, some of them have like half of it that's not usable. On the measurements that are here for the square footage of the lot, that includes all the unusable space, correct? Okay, just wondered that. And then was there conversation about, I lived behind a cemetery in Burbank, California years ago as a child, but we put the wall on, well, anyway. Are they planning to, just saying, it happens. What is the plan around the cemetery look like right now? It's just chain link or just, is it? Oh. How tall is it right now? I just didn't know, are they planning to put a solid protection around it, maybe with some trees too, to like, what are we going to do to protect and enhance the cemetery? If all these homes are coming in, there may be some ways, and I don't know where that comes in the planning, to ask for some of that to ensure that these backyards, like they say, that you're not looking at wrought iron fences and stuff.
We cannot ask for more than what's in the code, so it's just a wish list. That's completely up to them.
I have to finish reading the code. I just got in better. Okay.
You're fine. Those are all very viable questions. So, Joey.
So, for review for this, there's only four criteria that meet this, and I want everybody to remember this is just a concept plan. It's just almost an idea. There's not a lot of information that they need to provide. They've provided the information as Darren has said, but number one is the proposed subdivision shall conform to the general plan, this title, general design guidelines, and all relevant articles and sections of this chapter. The proposed use of the property are appropriate to the zone district. I want to look at that one right there because regardless if we make this motion, it needs to be made that it's pending the city council's zone change approval or denial, right? Because this can't be, this concept can't even be approved until that is done. But the way that we determine if it meets the zoning districts is by looking at the R115 zones and then looking at the distances on the front of every lot and the square footages. So, and I've gone through and done that portion. So every distance is more than 80 feet and each one is over 15,000 square feet. So that number 2 is already met. Number 3 is the layout design is responsive to the constraints in the topographic soils types, or topography, soils types, water course, flood, visual impacts, and preservation of views. So this one is basically what everybody's been talking about all night. You know, there's a lot there to that. And then before the capacity and adequacy of the public service and the utility services shall be adequate to service the proposed subdivision. Services required for the proposed subdivision may include roads, gas, electric, telephone, mail, police, and fire protection, culinary water, secondary water, sewer, and recreation. I believe one of the requirements from the fire was that all the houses would be sprinkled. Is that right?
Yes, that is correct.
Obviously, the rest of the stuff, everybody weighed in on the JUC comments, and everything else is adequate for that portion of it. The other thing I want to bring forth about this is that this is going to be we're going to either approve it or deny it in this meeting, and then it goes to city council for a report. Right? So this is just it's a really high level thing that they're asking for. And when it comes back from preliminary, all these questions are going to be coming up again. So that's when they're actually going to start designing it and getting further down.
And knowing that at preliminary, there are other reports that are required, such as drainage, they're going to have to go through and do quite a bit of engineering at that point. Yeah, they have to determine, make sure they're not flooding any other neighbors, creating other different, those types of things. And then again, once we have preliminary plat approval, we go into the construction drawing phase, which really details out a whole lot more.
We really like the layout of the subdivision. The good thing that I get to see is I get to see all the other problems, because when it comes to us first on PSR and then JUC, I get to see all the messed up stuff. And then when it kind of gets to this point, you're actually seeing a correction like 4 or 5, maybe even 6 times. I can tell you that the way that the lots were laid out where the circle is, when it was R120, it completely eliminated a lot of that. So, you know, as far as people talking about the parking, by making them lots smaller, it actually allowed that extra road to go around for extra parking too. So I think we saw like 3 or 4 completely different designs that had been from previous owners. And this to me actually is one of the better designs that I've seen, and even comes close to fitting a residential neighborhood. The other ones were pretty far off.
Yeah, a couple of years, well, it's been 5 years ago, there was a proposed subdivision that came that had, I think they were trying to do a PDO at the time, and Dan and everybody knows how difficult it was, but they were proposing 8 units per acre on that. And I don't know if that was a real thing, but they did have the signature of the owner of the property as allowing that proposal to come forth before the city. As Joey's talking about there, even Wasatch Builders has modified and made things a lot more compliance to the codes. You know, I'm not saying that access road is a done deal thing right now. We don't know that for sure, but
Sean has a question about the 660 feet.
So I just see on the Hurricane Valley Fire, their inspection, it says it fails on the maximum cul-de-sac length
right
per IFC 2018, 660 feet.
and that's why they are required to sprinkle. Yeah, yeah, definitely.
On that secondary egress,
That's where the sprinkler from Chief Gilday came up. But the sprinkler can even be waived if that secondary egress is 10% or less, which we've actually engineered it at 10%, so it is doable. And that would waive the sprinkler requirement.
Yeah, so the fire's a little bit higher requirement than the city. So we were going to do the road for the city, the sprinklers for the fire, but if that road can meet 10% less, it satisfies both of those.
Yeah, and
Feel that you can get that, like with the survey, you feel you can get it under 10 or at the 10%? Nice.
The only, I guess, agreement or discussion that we want to have is 10% is going to further scar that hillside. You're going to have to go further into the hill, which we would plan on
Retain.
beautifying, retaining, and correcting. It's just more of the, again,
And from the fire, we wouldn't have to do the secondary road with the sprinkler. But we're hoping to.
You still had to do, well, our city code requires you to do the secondary access because you can't have more than 20 lots on one entrance. So our code states you'd still have to do the secondary.
Right.
So the fires.
yeah, there's and so I say, like I say, we're talking about the 30% or greater taking that road across that in the hillside ordinance. But why did we allow UDOT to build that? Because they would have another few lots there and they possibly could come up. And if we talk about a secondary access, they could put another access right next to the entrance, which makes no sense. But that absolutely would meet the requirement of that ordinance, of that request. There's 2 accesses, 30 feet apart, which makes no sense. But I'm just saying, I think what they've worked out and what we can possibly do here because of the existing scarring on that hillside, we can maybe make something a little bit better than is there now.
Kind of speaks to that and earlier comments. You know, that starting from UDOT is not done. You know, when that bypass road goes in, there's gonna be a right turn lane coming off of Oakville Boulevard to hit that bypass. So that's gonna take it further into the hillside to create that right turn.
That is correct. That is correct.
The base of that hill where our, secondary access connects to Oakville Boulevard, you know, there's a recommendation for park there. We're completely open to that hillside. That hillside currently is shown as parts of the lot, and if those lots can be produced at 15,000 and without the hillside, then the hillside we're more than happy to turn over the possession of the city with what the city would desire. So we're really workable on that area. The park at the base is a great suggestion.
Have you ever done graveyard on a hillside? No? Oh, okay. I've been in England. There's some beautiful, gorgeous. Stacy, in England, there's some beautiful, cemeteries in England that are on hillsides that are steeper than that. So a little more water there, though, too. So I did not mean that as derogatory.
When we make that, someone makes a motion to approve the concept plan, it needs to be made that the zone change, the approval is pending the approval of the zone change, because if the zone change fails at city council, then this concept plan is not, it won't meet the conformity of the zoning characteristics of the property. So whoever makes that, however makes it, if it's a denial, then we obviously don't need that portion, but the zone change is still going to be going to the city council regardless. Anybody?
Since I denied the last one, I recommend approval with a condition that the zone change passes in city council.
Okay, we have a motion.
I second.
We have a motion and a second. We'll vote.
Wow, I don't know, because that, if I say yes, then I'm saying that that's okay with that secondary access, and I'm really not. So I'm gonna say no.
Well, do we need to make that part of our recommendation?
We already have a motion and a second, so we need to make a vote.
Lay it out. So I'm gonna say no.
Aye.
Aye.
I didn't like the last motion on the zone change. Because it included that it's now all R1, R15, so the conceptual, just aye on the conceptual. I just feel like we're trapped right there on that motion before that.
Okay, that finishes business item F5 and takes us to business item F6. This is a discussion on ordinance 2022.XX nightly rental. Okay, hey, we're having a meeting here, guys. We'll get to the public comments on this one here in a second, but if we can pull that up from the Dropbox. See the red line because I can tell what's going on. So this is just on the nightly rental. The stuff that was written, I think in yellow was my recommendations, and I think the stuff that's in green was staff recommendations. Everybody had a chance to look at that, and basically it's to clarify for the secondary structures, which the attorney pointed out. And then also this is to make it to where that some of the commercial, the last down there, the commercial, it has exclusions for hotels, motels, RV parks, and gives them guys a path forward, because at the current time we have an RV park that will be nightly rentals, and there's no way for them to have a nightly rental according to our code. So at this time, do you guys have any questions on it?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so on E1, it says, after a time limit is reached, a renter cannot re-register for a minimum of 48 hours. Does that mean that they can come back in 48 hours and stay, or just re-register for a later date?
Or move to a different space.
Yeah, so what that is for is, I don't know if you remember in Lavercan, or it's kind of a protection in the RV park because we don't have an RV park zone. So let's say you go and you rent there and you want to just stay there for 2 years.
Yeah,
That's to eliminate you from doing that.
right.
And it's to make these RV parks that turn into long-term stays. And so it's something to put in our nightly rental code until we build an RV code, an RV park code ordinance. So, and this was actually brought up from Commissioner Allred that pointed that out. And I think it helps deter some of that problem.
So they would have to leave for 48 hours, but they could come back after 48 hours. Because I know some of them, you can stay like 14 days, but then you have to be gone for 14 days or something like that. So
48 hours.
It still limits into 30 for the year. So if you're here for a month or something, then that's your month for the year. You just have to leave for a couple of days in the middle, but you can't come back after you've been there 30 days in a 12-month period. So they can't just keep leaving, coming back. Yeah.
And then there was some wording things that we need to, on R1, I think that we need to have a new paragraph when it starts talking about model homes located, because that's kind of a different section than hotels, motels, and RV parks. So can we have a second paragraph there where it says model homes located within a subdivision for which sales will be made?
I was thinking you should do like R for the hotel.
So what we're voting on tonight, or what we've got in front of us is so we had this for discussion on the last meeting. So what we need to do tonight is either approve it or deny it,
Okay.
and then we can rework
make
that, right?
changes.
So we
Okay.
have this in front of us. We can have some slight modifications to this, but what's presented and put out for public notice is basically what we need to go forth
Vote
on.
on?
Yeah. This was a discussion item on last meeting. Yeah, 100%. Yeah. I just wanted to make sure that I didn't miss something.
Well, just a question. In the discussion from last time, we had talked about like when the proposal for having, the 100 dwellings and then no more than 5. I thought we were discussing changing that to a percentage so that you could say you're doing 20 homes and you can have 5% instead of doing the hard number. That was
Percentage, but then who's going to police it?
who's going to police that?
It's easier to police five nightly rentals on a home occupation permit than it is to go figure out the percentage of a subdivision every time to allow them a 6th or a 7th or a, so they would basically have to prove their percentage, or we would have to go calculate that percentage. That's kind of what came up on that.
I guess I just had some concerns with the minimum being 100, if that would look discriminatory.
There's a really good reason for that being 100. Do you want a night, so if someone comes in and has a small tract for, let's say 20, they do 20 subdivisions, or what was just presented that was here, do you want them to have model homes and nightly rentals for a small space like that? They're not as committed into it as a developer that's, what the realistic thing is our nightly rental code is to protect the citizens and keep the small town feel. So we want to keep that to a minimum period. We don't want people having nightly rentals and model homes in new subdivisions that are, so it's there to still protect the citizens and keep this small.
Is there any limitations that we're going to be added for like how long they can hold those model homes as monthly rentals before they could just keep them permanently as rentals in the city? Once
the subdivision is complete, it would automatically, They could, once their sales portion and the model portion of that is done, then they have no desire. So we could take their conditional use permit at that, or we can, they're still gonna have to come and apply for a conditional use permit. So we could put that as a stipulation on that conditional use permit, is that when we could
Building.
building's complete, you could.
Okay.
Okay, do we have any more comments on it? Okay, so at this time, we'll open up the public hearing for this nightly rental ordinance. Public input is sought on ordinance 2022.XX- Title 10, Chapter 17, Section 3 to amend the permit application and review process, accessory structures, occupancy time limits, and to modify certain exclusions. If anybody would like to speak to this on the public hearing portion, please state your name and address at the microphone and limit your comments to 3 minutes. Anybody? I thought Jake would be up here for sure because he put a lot of time into this code.
Just really one comment is I'd like to see it more than the 48 hours to where they go drive at a hotel and come right back. So they can stay 2 weeks, but then they've got to be gone a week. So hopefully they'll go find another RV park rather than going to a hotel, coming back. So they're staying there all year.
Sandy Cordova, 275 North Boulevard. I just have a question. How a lot of the RV park goers are snowbirds. So you guys are trying to eliminate that in the Tokerville RV park area. So if you scroll up to the one above.
We're still in the public hearing, so when we close the public hearing, we can. Any other comments?
Yeah, Mark Workling, 152 North Toker Boulevard. I'm confused by R3 where it says all requirements of 10.17.3 rental code shall be met. And right up above, it's taking exception to those. So ownership requirements, 14 days of the owner being in the city, that all applies here.
We can't answer.
Oh, you can't answer the question? Okay. So during the public hearing, I'll say, I think that's confusing. I think that's contradictory, and you ought to deny that. And rework those paragraphs.
Okay. Any other public hearing? Okay, I would take a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing. Second that motion.
Motion in a second, we'll vote.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so back to discussion. I should have wrote the questions down. But the previous one, I do agree that might have some.
It's a little confusing.
We might ought to strike that, which we can strike from. We can strike that because if they, on the exclusions, if they have to meet all the requirements, then.
Right.
Yeah, this one
Yeah.
right here. Time limits, is that what you're saying?
I think they're getting us confused. You only stay 30 days a year, but you stay 2 weeks and 48 hours, you can come back and stay a week and a half and you're done for the whole year.
Yes.
That's the way I read that.
Yes.
But that's not.
Which I don't know.
Yeah,
That's,
that doesn't.
that seems awfully restrictive.
Pretty short. You want to change it to 90 days, 100 days?
Well, it depends on if you want them to camp there for the rest of their lives or move on.
We don't want people, that's the thing that we're really trying to do.
For everybody else that
We're
wants
gonna
to
build
have a
a,
spot.
we're gonna do a nightly, or we're gonna do an RV park ordinance that'll probably take care of this, but in the short time and just the
Yeah,
really
because this is
short-term
just
future, we're gonna strike this eventually, it's gonna
Well,
remove
actually,
from
this is
here.
the thing.
So I mean, if we want to change a little bit of verbiage for
Yeah, that's
100 days, that's fine, or what, it's open for discussion and we could definitely make a motion either way.
We're gonna work on it
I
directly.
think we need to work on it.
If we
Yeah.
just pass it, then we're safe.
Yeah, we're
Until we
safe,
can-
but we
until we
can, in a motion like today, we could say, in the motion, we recommend approval, but we want to strike number 3, R3, and we want to change the 30-day limit to a 100-day limit. So you
want to
can,
strike number 3 or change it to 10-17-3-E-1, like it is proposed? Or you can strike all of it or just?
well, in the exclusions, they can't meet all the requirements of the nightly rental code, so it does contradict
But those are
itself.
the points to include how many nights they can stay in model homes.
So that's saying it needs to meet all of the code. That was probably a typo. I can't remember what I typed on there, but it's basically saying that they have to meet the whole code. So that means they couldn't fall under an exclusion. The way I read it is, yeah. So that number 3 needs to be struck regardless. So I think the big thing is, we can, when we make a motion, we can strike that. And then if somebody wants to change the number of days from 30 to,
Unless specified and on.
R.
Which brings your exclusions into that line.
I think there's several that need to be relooked at.
I do
before
too. I didn't see some of these.
we had the discussion item last meeting and we put it out for public notice. Any more comments?
No.
You want to make a motion?
We're gonna end up having to change it, there's no doubt about it.
So can this be changed and can this be voted? How hard is it to change it again? Go through this whole process.
It's just the public notice process and all that.
It's a 2-month process, essentially, if you change it.
We'd have to go back to the discussion item, then back to the,
Significant changes. If it's
Yeah.
significant changes, then it needs to. Not
Yeah.
significant changes.
we would have, if we did significant, we can even announce tonight that there's going to be another public hearing on it at our next meeting. But if we make them minor changes like that, since it's already been public format, we can say strike that and we can say change that. And if it's not significant, we can make the changes right now if you want.
So instead of 30 days, we would be comfortable with what?
Make that motion. I don't have the stuff in front of me.
What was that?
Expecting to see that from here.
Here, I've got it right
Stand up here.
Yeah. Look at this if you want. And it's the last page that they're discussing, page 4.
Picking on a new guy here. What motion are we looking for here? Just accept it the way it is? Striking 3?
I think we need, in the motion, I think we need to strike R3. And if you guys want to change we keep the chatter down for a little bit so we could, if you want to change the days, like 30 days, I do agree, that might be a little bit of a short thing. So we could extend it to 60, we can extend it to 90 and go from there. And then if you guys want, then we can just throw this back on for another discussion item on the next meeting and we can look at it again.
Well, 90 days in a calendar year, if they come and stay for a couple of months in the spring and the month in the fall, there's 90 days.
That is.
You still got to move every 14 days.
But
That's too long for a nightly rental.
Yeah, these are nightly
Yes,
rental
these are-
homes, not.
These are nightly
They're
rentals.
little cabins, right?
We could strike that whole verbiage on the whole 90 days and
It's not just cabins, though. This is applying to your nightly
RV.
rentals, Airbnbs, all of those.
Airbnbs.
Turn it into a long-term rental if you go that long.
I think the other thing we could do to make it even easier is strike E1 and R3, because that's really for the RV park.
Yeah, that's.
And we can
Right.
build the RV code and
Yeah, that's
Because right
the
now for your
confusion with that.
You don't have any restrictions on Airbnbs, but if you strike E1, if somebody can rent an Airbnb for a year.
What was the current on that? Does it?
Yeah, and
And if it's supposed to be nightly,
It's in-
that negates that purpose.
it's in a house. It's not in a trailer somewhere. I don't have a problem if someone comes and wants to give someone a year's worth of income. You know, for their
I don't
nightly
know that I
rental.
do either.
It costs a lot of money and they're still gonna be controlled by that person on the nightly rental. So I would say we strike that out of here and put it in the RV code.
So strike E,
Strike E1 for this.
strike E1 and R3.
And R3.
Still does not, it still makes it too long for a nightly rental though.
So they can't stay longer than,
Well, the only reason that was put in there is just for the RV park.
We're kind of cross.
What we need to do is just get the RV park code built, ordinance built, and then it won't pertain to a nightly rental, you know?
at time.
At some point, a nightly rental turns into a full-time rental.
Right, and it has to stay, yeah, I mean, everything else has always said less than 30 days, right?
Make that motion.
I
We gotta
can't
figure
do
it
that
out.
yet, man, I don't have it figured out, because I do think that we don't want them staying longer than 30 days or, you know.
In a nightly rental.
Right.
Yeah, I don't think you should be staying any longer in a nightly rental because then you're not a
Well,
nightly
then it's a
rental.
long-term rental.
Yes, you're
I think that's already in here
you're drifting
somewhere.
over into a whole different rental. I thought there was in there.
I think that there's
I
a
thought there
section
was
in there
too.
too.
That's the only one that has anything referencing to do with business days.
We can also just reword E1 just to say that, you know, you can't have a consecutive 90 days.
The rental shall be lesser of 10, oh, that's people.
Well, you could just do it that way. For the code here, for the nightly rental code, you can just say nothing can be consecutive more than 30 days and no single member could stay. I thought we had this all wired out on the last meeting.
Well, I thought that was in the previous code. Didn't it say that in the previous code about 30 days?
They're just twisting the two into one.
Yeah.
That's what's happening. It's just
So here it is. It actually is. So it's nightly rental owners, residents that are absent from Tokerville. Oh, that's right. Periods of times exceeding 14 days. Sorry, no, that's wrong.
that's the owners.
I would change that. I'm not sure what's the process.
I have no decision making.
That's for, that's,
That's for a
Excuse me.
we've already, yeah, we closed the public hearing. We've got to keep a little bit orderly here. So contact us for PSR and we'll definitely put that right through.
I'll give you a card. We can talk after this.
So where would I add 30 days in there if I could?
Well, we could just do it to that E1.
Okay, so E1 would say.
We could say,
occupancy time limits. I would strike calendar year because I think they take coming back
anytime.
a couple of times a year, 3 times a year, and they might stay.
So you could do a total of like 90 days. Let's say someone wanted to come in twice, you know, and they stay a longer time. So if you did 90 days,
Well, we've had multiple
occupancy.
people come back because they like the home and those kind of
Yeah, occupancy by the same person is limited to 90 days in any calendar year, period. Strike the rest of it.
Wouldn't it be 90 days, but 30 consecutive?
30 consecutive would be.
30 days in a calendar year.
Does that impact the RV?
30 days in a calendar year is what it is.
Say that again, Wayne.
Shall not exceed 14 consecutive days after time limit. So they, whatever they do, they can only stay 30 days in the whole year.
Well,
I'm
if they,
reading, after time is reached, the vendor cannot re-register for a minimum of 48 hours. Is
So if
that
we drop
time
that-
reached? Is that the 30 days time or is that?
What if we just change that to the 30 to 60? And so it would just read occupancy time limits. Occupancy by the same person is limited to a total of 60 days in any calendar year, period. Right? So it's going to be up to the
or 30
Airbnb.
days consecutive.
Yeah.
Because I do.
Well, I mean, so we're just talking about the Airbnb, right? So let's
Right,
say
right.
someone does want to come in and they want to do an extended vacation and, maybe they're working and they're renting the Airbnb for work for 3 months or,
Yeah.
Right.
like they're used
I
way
guess
more for just
I
recreation.
don't have a problem with it, other than I know in the past, we called nightly rentals less than 30 days.
Yeah.
So
We could
that's
do
the
it
only thing,
consecutive.
that's the only thing I'm trying to work out.
So we could do the 30 days consecutive and 90 days total in a year.
Yes,
So moved, huh?
yes,
With a break in between the 30 days.
There you go.
yes.
You got
30
that
days, get
worded?
out 40 hours and start it all over again.
So total of
Segregate.
90 days with no more than 30 consecutive days?
If you change it to that, where does the RV piece come in? I know you're making another.
We'll just have to redo it. We're just gonna have to strike that.
They need to go away for a while, not just one day, and come back and up for another 30 days.
I say
More so in an RV.
Once they
but
decide on the new
If I was a-
language, we
if I
should
was a-
open it up for public comment.
I'd be happy to have them for 90 days.
What is a substantive change?
She knows the public comment, the public forum is closed, but she's just wondering if you're making those wording changes, she has something else to say. We reopen the public forum.
We can. It's up to the commissioners.
I make a motion that we reopen the public
After we're done.
public hearing, I'm sorry.
Well, get your file.
After we're done.
Okay, we're back into public
My
hearing.
money, what they're
If
gonna
anybody
say.
would like to address the commission, please go to the stand, 3 minutes. Please state your name and address. What's that?
What do you change it to so we can comment?
We're gonna change.
So what we're looking at is striking R3, which is kind of looping itself back into it.
And then we're gonna change
And
the
then-
time limits to it,
To where we have possibly 30 consecutive days
not to
and
exceed
no
90.
more than 90 in a year.
Okay, Sandy Cordova, 275 Tocqueville Boulevard. And I've heard contradictory statements while you guys have been discussing this up here. I've heard talk about if it's their B&B, they want to rent it for a whole year salary, then it's their decision to do that, which I agree with. If they want to get B&B rates and somebody wants to pay that B&B rate, they should be able to get that. To limit a B&B versus an RV park, I think those are two totally different things. And you shouldn't limit somebody's B&B to 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. It should be up to them.
That's why I never know.
Hello again, Dan Catlin, 821 South Peachtree. When we went through the nightly rentals on the planning commission, as I recall, we got beat to death for months to get that worked out, to get the language where it was acceptable to everybody. If you need an RV ordinance, write an RV ordinance and leave the nightly rental alone. Just my input. And if you don't feel good about it being clean, don't feel you're pressured to have to pass it tonight.
Any other comments? Okay, I'll take a motion to close it.
I'll make a motion to close the public meeting.
I second that motion.
Take a vote.
Yay.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, does anybody want to make a motion?
I'm going to make a motion to table this until we have a chance to look at it, maybe clean it up and revisit it at a later date.
We table on a public hearing?
Yeah, we can do.
Yeah.
This-
If you make significant changes, you'll have another public hearing.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I have a second. I second it.
Okay, we'll take a vote. This is the craziest thing I've ever seen.
I know. I don't know what to do.
The nightly rentals is horrible. It's always this way.
We have a motion and a second. We'll take a vote.
Yeah, I know. Because it'd be nice to just get this damn thing done. Yay.
Nate.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Motion carries.
I really know what we're gonna clean.
All right, we'll move on to item number 7. Item number 7 is discussion on ordinance 2022.XX zoning administrators and grading plans. So Darren, would you like to give us the lowdown on this one? Mhm.
Zoning administrator and grading plans. Are we talking grading a zoning administrator and grading plans? Two separate things? Or zoning administrator or grading plans?
Zoning.
Got me off guard here. I did not even realize that we were going over this tonight. It's on the back of the sheet. So,
I was gonna say,
here.
If you want me to start,
I-
for one in our ordinance, in our grading ordinance, in our grading ordinance, we did not have it references the planning and zoning administrator, but that position did not exist. And so it should have, but we used Mike Versamack, and that. And so we had to, so step one of this is the language of putting planning and zoning, adding that. It used to say building department. Now it's going to say zoning administrator. So Attorney Snow had to actually define what zoning administrator is. So you can see right there. So it's just a creation of that position of the zoning administrator. We did not have that as a formal position, which Darren has. So,
I've had it like a week.
yeah. So he's really getting beat up tonight. But yeah, so step one is just saying that it's item 1 is creating that, the definition and the definition of the zoning administrator. So that's one. The second thing is our current grading ordinance does not allow for any type of grading until you have a final plat. And so this is, this takes into consideration changing that language from ours, the way that ours reads. I'm sure you can pull it if you go up just a little bit, Days, then people can see it. But so it says, such permitted use that requires a building permit or other approval is provided by this title, such as home construction, or home commercial site or subdivision, must obtain either final site plan approval, so final site or final plat approval. Language in this would consider changing it just to consider changing it to site plan approval and then preliminary plat, so that they could pull grading permits at preliminary plat. Understanding it is not a guarantee of final construction drawings or even final plat, but it does allow, but it does allow work, to be done if they need to go clear something or whatever. So it's different than mass grading, which happens before a preliminary plat. Grading happens, in different phases. But this one is asking to change it from final plat to preliminary. And part of the reason of that is, I can let Darren go in here, but then also in this section 1 where it just says hotel, condo, townhomes, and multifamily, that's language that actually adding to their grading ordinance. And so we've obviously been in touch with them. And so this is some language that they're putting in under this 1A. It's specific to hotels, condos, townhomes, and multifamily, but that does require them to do that. That's kind of more protection for the city just because it's tied to the way a lot of them get funding and things like that. So City of St. George has put that section in there. But basically what Tokerville's would be doing is moving the approval to grade from a final plat to a preliminary. I'm not entirely sure. Other than bonding for the whole entire project, I'm not entirely sure how someone would get a final plat without moving dirt. But
I apologize. I didn't realize that this was what this was. Well, kind of. I kind of helped write it. I didn't add very much. So in essence here, why, like we said, was we're talking about going from the mass grading plan and at preliminary plat approval. And so with that being in case right now, is we require that we go through the full construction drawings and we have a final plat approved based on those grading plan that's in those construction drawings and those types of things. In this ordinance, there is some things that to tell you the truth, I haven't had the time. I've been here so a short time that I have not gone through this completely 100%. And there was some things that I think that needs to change at preliminary plat approval. So preliminary plat probably ought to have a little bit of tweaking as well, because when we talk about this, we come in with a grading plan, a mass grading plan, and we talk about in there, we would require such things as a dust control plan, a stormwater control plan, all these other things. We'd want to cut and fill sheets to see what they are going to actually move before they actually did that, because essentially this is giving them the ability to grade before they get the construction drawings. Now, I don't know if you're really familiar with what it tells of construction drawings. The construction drawings are going to show your site plan with a grading plan, which will have your fill volumes on it. It also, at a grading plan, this will give us the ability to assess fees based on the building code, of which we haven't been doing in the past. You just basically go through, you get your construction drawings, and there's no fees for grading. All the other cities have this in place to where there is and most developers expect a fee for these. So, and I think we've put that into some of this. It does talk about into the UBC being in conjunction with the UBC. So that's really what's kind of initiated these changes. Also, City Council has given direction to Planning Commission, from what I understand, is to look at the grading plan and see if there's something that can be done here on anticipation of the developments that are happening out to the west.
This is actually probably the first ordinance that has been completely drafted by lawyers instead of us, since I've been here. So
yeah, we had some, yeah, and engineers. There's been some engineering as well. That was the thing. So I'm not exactly sure where we're tonight. If we come down to that motion, you can approve, disapprove, or approve with condition. I guess if you're going to approve, recommendation is that there's possibly some further insight before it goes or comes back to you, or you still have that option to table again if you want.
someone was talking about the dust control?
Yeah.
So on the dust control, it says whenever the negative ground cover is removed or disturbed, or whenever fill material is placed on the site, the exposed surface shall be treated to eliminate dust arising from the exposed material. It says the zoning administrator must approve a dust control method. So on each time that basically to me, that says that anytime they're doing this grading plan, that you have to approve a grading or a dust control method.
Right. And those are usually binders that they use. They don't just go to put a crust over it with water. There's usually binders that are added to that. So if they're going to grade it off so that they have from one phase to another phase, that they need to take material from one phase to move it to another phase, they will be able to do that. But then that other phase might not come along for another year. There possibly some of the things we could put into that is that those need to be developed within a certain time frame. Those types of things as well.
And why I looked at this is over the last couple of weeks, we've seen that wind come through and how much dust is blowing off of that.
Yep.
Then I read a comment or a article actually about Hurricane and how developments, people living there were complaining about all the dust and things like that going. So then I did a little bit more research into what St. George does. And what they do is they've got an air quality map. So you get a dust or a grading permit. You also get a dust control permit. It applies to 1 acre. But then it doesn't just say you have to have dust control, but it also gives a we warn you once, the next time is, something, so it gives a little bit of a, 4 times they're paying an administrative fee.
So there's fees or, yeah.
From an area where it was a huge problem, Vegas always had that problem. I think it's something that we might want to get a hold of and ahead of now, as opposed to, hey, you're making too much dust. And so they know that there's a little bit more to it if they, and it said, I read some of the comments in St. George, and it says pretty much, it's just a, hey guys, we see some dust going over there, and they take care of the problem for the most often. But anyways, I'd like to see something like that put into it, though, that has, they have an actual whole air quality. It's a Chapter 9 air quality regulation, and it tells you exactly what and how they're going to monitor it and all of those kind of things. So
And is that their ordinance?
this is their ordinance, yeah.
And it's 9?
It's, and I made a couple copies, so I can give you one of them, but it's Chapter 9 air quality regulations.
Do you know, did they apply that at mass grading? Do they apply that at preliminary? I'm just wondering if it mostly applies to mass grading for where they're down on that southeast side where they're doing DeBarrio. I'm just wondering, because that's like 730 acres grading.
Find that, but what it specifically says is 1 acre or more.
1 acre or more.
Yeah, so it's fairly small projects.
Okay.
We currently have
Currently, the city does not allow mass grading. They allow grading at final plat. And so at that point, then, yeah, we have a calculation that we use that includes a review fee, and then it's based on cubic yards that they would open. We do have that, and city council's approved that as part of the uniform fee schedule.
So they can't grade until they have final plat approval.
As a
So
code says
at
now.
that point, you're getting a bond from the developers, aren't you?
Yes.
For 125% of the project.
Because they walk away from it for 6 months and work with the city trying to get everything, you got a dust problem.
Right.
Anderson Junction's got a dust problem because that RV park has never been nothing.
Right.
So we need to be covered on that. And I don't
And
see that in any, seen the bonding.
Yeah, the bonding
Yep.
requirements are in there. If you go down, it's a obviously letter of credit or a cash bond.
25% of it?
Yeah, keep
Yeah.
going down.
No grading until they get final plat.
Yeah, they could do the same thing, except they could go back up. They could do the same thing, except you need to find
So
out.
the way that the code reads right now is you can't grade until you get final plat. What this is saying is that now when you have a preliminary plat approval, then you can apply for a grading permit.
The problem with that, and I've been around that a lot, is there's a lot of time between preliminary and final. So you're out grading a lot, you're making a mess.
But yeah, and so,
Seldom do they control their dust, it's really hard to control. And walk away for a month or two, but it's gonna get dust again. So I don't know if that's premature. I know they all wanna get in there and just grub everything as fast as they can and make the scar of what they're gonna do, but then it sits for so long. Then all your citizens complain. You do have a dust problem, which is pretty hard to abate unless they're on the side every day with a water truck or put some kind of an amendment on. So I was thinking we were going the other way and not letting them do that. And so not such a time. Preliminary and final is a long ways away.
so the kind of the thought process is it's not mass grading before they have, engineering and things. At preliminary, it actually ramps up the requirements that they have to have for preliminary, that puts them closer to construction drawings, which will shorten that time frame. But I agree with what you're saying. I mean, as far as you do always, whenever you let anybody develop, you always have the risk that they will walk away, right? And so there is
When they go out and grade that mess.
they.
So basically you would require a stormwater prevention plan.
Prior to grading.
Correct.
And they have to maintain that until.
And a drainage study, and it has a lot of requirements to pull it. I mean, you can see like,
So see this.
even right there, even the bond has to cover everything except the building. It says paving, hardscape, landscape, utilities, like all of those, right?
Preliminary plat.
So who enforces the SWIFT? Do we have a SWIFT person in
That
town?
would be zoning administrator.
Darren.
So Darren hasn't been through it all.
We're gonna pile it right on him, aren't we?
Well, what's his name?
Yes, that's a job.
But I can say, if Aaron hasn't been through it 100% and has things he
If
wants.
he's accepting it, I think we need to make a motion to approve him as the zoning administrator right now.
He wants to go through it.
Well, then maybe we should table it.
I think so.
Darren, you want to go through this further?
I'm gonna need to go through, I feel better about that, but I apologize, it's just been crazy. I would say that probably since I've been hired, maybe 10% of my time has been spent actually on planning and drawing stuff.
Yeah, he's buried.
There's so much other stuff that
So this ordinance is not separate, it's tied to zoning administrator and grading
The
plans.
way this, the way these,
Correct.
the way these changes got crafted, correct me if I'm wrong, Captain, is that we took our old code, we had,
We had Rick Rosen, what we did is we went to Rosenberg Associates, Joey, me, and Darren. We went to Rosenberg Associates and we said, hey, we're being approached by development and we want to make sure that our grading ordinance is in line. So we met with them. We actually met with them twice and we had them go through our code and did that. So both as the engineer and also because he's the mayor of the city of Santa Clara. So he's seen it come from all up along the way. He's obviously very well respected. And so we went straight to the straight. So he went through and did the first draft of this. We worked closely with him. We actually added this hotel condo. That was at the suggestion of Bruce Jenkins, who is, one of the city's attorneys. He went through it and said, this is what he checked with City of St. George, said this is what they're kind of doing. And so that's how this kind of evolved. And then obviously our own attorney, Heath Snow, the city attorney, went through it as well.
And conflict.
And both.
My comments on.
Yeah, this one says 100, but our actual one.
1,000 times with, as she said, with multiple people. And I've seen every single revision back, and I know Darren hasn't had the time to look at it, but I know there are some time constraints with the city, not anything to do with the developer on this problem also. And I think this is some of the strongest code that we've ever been presented. As, like I said, it's been written by engineers and people that have way more experience than we do. And going through every single draft and getting it to this point, I think it's a pretty solid
And we should
code.
mention that in addition to that, this is probably like about the 9th revision.
Yeah.
I mean, this is not like, oh, this is just a preliminary that we're putting before you. We really, we tried to get something that was high quality, that,
So is the bonding at preliminary or is it at final?
so the,
It's a separate thing. So
Right.
you'd get preliminary, you can't get a grading permit until you get your preliminary plat approval.
Right.
And then you can submit for and then probably coins or like follow each other along the path. So then once the preliminary approval is gone, which would go through us, then city council, then the grading permit can start going through the process of getting approved.
They can start moving dirt right after preliminary.
After this is approved.
After this is approved.
This has to be done after.
And when do they do the bonding?
That's all. The bonding has to be in place prior to the grading.
preliminary.
we would have two separate bonds. You would have one for grading, and then when the construction drawings come in, you would have bonding for improvements in the public way, not part of their private property. Because really, it doesn't become the city's until they final that plat.
Right.
And then the city accepts the plat. Then those improvements that they put in become the city. So they don't have a bond for improvements that they're putting in, such as like that. But during grading, they would have to.
So before they move dirt, they have to do bonding.
Yes.
Okay. So under the dust control, 1018B5, I just kind of penned it in there. I didn't know if this would fit, but and that's back to this air quality and the dust control permit. If we were to change that or not change, but add in there an item B or item A, whatever it is, if disturbed area is 1 acre or greater and a dust control permit is required. And then must be obtained and provisions of the air quality regulation chapter, whatever we decide that is, will be in effect. Does that sound like something that would work in that? And
do we have an air quality?
you'd have to say for future air quality. That's why I'm saying, so
We don't, but we can put it in the language that would say, you know, I mean.
I happen to know that St. George's won't even issue a grading permit unless it's less than 10, right?
Yeah.
So, when they,
I'm sorry.
I don't think St. George will allow you to, like theirs is, or maybe, no, it is, I'm sorry, no, just disregard that.
Anything over an acre in
Yeah.
St. George.
Yeah.
Yeah. So wouldn't we put subject to
So
any?
ours has just that caveat at the end that says all dust control measures must meet state and federal standards.
So that would be
Right,
that.
and to me, it's, I'm hearing a lot of people complain about dust flying, and there's really no bite to, or, hey, you guys gotta stop, but there's nothing there to, you know.
What you could do is you could put that violating dust control at the state and federal, you could put in there that that falls under a land use violation. Our land use violation fees are insane. I mean, they're huge. They're $1,000 a day. Day 11, it goes to $10,000 a day till the violation's fixed. That was one thing when we redid the uniform fee schedule, we were like, grading is expensive. Like, right, grading is gonna be expensive. Developers expect grading to be expensive, you know? So, I mean, we're right in line with all the other cities as far as charging our review fees, charging our, you know, all of those, and then doing the calculation. We're using the same one as City of St. George, same one as Santa Clara. That's all in our uniform fee schedule. So we're getting it on the front end from the fees from the developers, but developers also understand that if they violate, right, land use violations, penalties are huge. So. Yeah, that violating the dust control falls under a land use violation. That's the biggest fee we have, and it is steep.
Who's monitoring?
Well, we just hired, well, we can talk about that later.
Done the public hearing portion on this yet, so we might as well open up for the public hearing portion for, public input is sought on ordinance 222.XX amending Title II, Chapter 2-7 to create the position of zoning administrator and to amend Title 10, Chapter 10 or 18B, Section 1 to amend specific standards for public improvement regarding grading plans. Anybody would like to talk about this topic, please state your name and address and address us at the microphone. Said that a lot tonight. Okay,
Dan?
no comment?
Okay, we'll move
I
on.
would take a motion to close the public
Make a
hearing.
motion to close the public hearing.
I second that.
We have a motion second, we'll vote.
Aye.
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 Okay. This was also. We're having a lot of comments on something that we had all the discussion item on last month, so I think we should try to figure a way to move this forward to the city council, because I think the city council is going to have way more issues than we are. So I'd like to say a way to move this forward, and if we need to come back and make more amendments to it, we can do that.
I agree with that. I think I'll move on it quick.
You mentioned it was 125%.
And that's that ordinance right there.
Yeah. So if you, just one second before you do that, I just wanted to just to kind of what Stacy was saying, kind of what Sean was saying. If you on there, we just pull up our uniform fee schedule. I'm just going to show you right here kind of what I was saying. Because I like the idea of tying it to some sort of dust control, some sort of, I mean, if there's one thing we have is wind, right?
Well, you can just look outside and Tokerville is
That's what I
windy.
said. I said, it's not the river, it's coming off the hillside or blowing away, right there. If you go to our land use right there, land use violations, if you look at those fees. So like general, sure, you got a junk car, there you go, within our land use right there for code enforcement. It begins immediately. That's $1,000 a day, up to 10 days, 10,000 per day, and that's until remedies. So, I mean, those fees, I mean, if you look at everything else, if you have a junky car, it's $25. If you've got too much dust on day 11, it's 10 grand.
I'm used to that kind of torture.
Yeah.
I see that all the time. That's put some teeth in it.
Yeah,
It's gonna make it happen.
that's what so, yeah. So I do like the idea of trying the dust control, of classifying dust control as a land use violation.
Okay, so we would add that in the dust control
Yep.
portion.
Air quality of dust control, yeah, I like the idea of trying that too, you know, fine. Okay. That was just, that's the only, just to kind of.
No, I think that's-
the only way to make
that's-
it a land use, 'cause that's major.
Right.
Was that a motion?
That was a motion, wasn't it, Sean?
That was a motion.
I liked what you said, so let's do that. There's the motion right there.
I'll accept her motion.
Okay, we're still in a meeting here.
So, yeah, you take that down.
So where would that be included? I'm not sure how to put that
And
in
in
there.
there, I would also include that 125, because we emailed back and forth on that with the attorneys.
You want to add the 125, 125%?
125%.
On the bond.
And you can just say we want to add that verbiage in that section and they'll renumber it.
Exactly.
You know, so it doesn't have to be exact, word verbatim.
Yeah.
Okay, so what is my verbiage again?
Well, it's just according to, it would be a land use violation.
Okay, so, oh my gosh.
Well, you can just
Say
say
say according to land use.
Yeah.
Well, I gotta put that in.
In the
here.
appropriate places.
Yeah.
You don't have to put it anywhere. You can have.
You just say add these things where it's.
Right, so I need
You
to
don't
add.
Yeah, you could just add them 3 items. You can add it from 100% to 125%. You can add that to tie it in and make it and then we'll rework it for that.
Okay, so I'm
25% of
adding,
the bond.
help me with what I'm adding.
You're gonna make a
25%
motion to what?
To approve.
Recommend
Recommend
approval.
approval.
Okay.
With the inclusion of 125% on bonding.
Bonding.
Make sure these girls are getting this.
Stacey's gonna, actually redline this again, so make sure she.
Okay,
say it clearly.
I'm just putting it together now.
Okay.
125% bonding, and then we're going to,
So the bonding of 125%.
and then we're gonna do, add to the dust control. That we are going to make that a land use violation according to our uniform fee schedule.
Is there one
Do
more
you
thing?
want to add your verbiage into that other one? The one that you wrote on that?
Well, I don't know if that is a fitting though, if we do that, right?
Yeah, that would probably, that would cover it.
That's what I was confused on. On 1018B5, let's make a subsection B. And if disturbed area is a 1 acre or greater, a dust control permit must be obtained. And the provisions of air quality regulations will be in effect.
You can just, you
We're gonna add
can
it.
reference that to state law.
Yeah, it's stated by the law that's.
Okay, I think all that
Say
sounds good.
EPA
So-
qualities, yeah.
You guys have any questions on that motion?
No.
Did you get all that? Because I didn't either. So either.
Make him look good, would you?
I know what I want, but it's a lot.
I'll second that motion.
We have a motion and a second. We'll take a vote.
Yeah, let's vote.
Aye.
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 Very good.
And I apologize for all of that.
Okay, so business item number 8 was moved up to the very first, so that we can consider that one done. And now we'll close the business section of the meeting and take us into the discussion item. Okay, so we'll try to make this a little quicker here because I think we can spend more time on this next week. But I went through I got through the first 5 pages, and I'm wondering if we shouldn't, I've gone through this a ways, but I'm wondering if we shouldn't shift gears a little bit on this. Because when I get to, let's see, when I get down to number 3, F3 on the, did you go through this? Didn't see that probably.
It's not in
So,
it's not in my docket.
so when we get to the 20% of commercial and all that kind of stuff, we had a brief conversation. So what the intent of this is almost to create an MPDO again and a resort overlay. It's got a lot of information in it. So I'm wondering if we should try to back up a little bit and say, let's go to just an overlay with permitted uses and define the permitted uses. And I don't know, I'm just
Well, and the
talking
only
out loud
reason,
like
the
it's
reason,
discussion,
and the
right?
reason I like that portion that's in there is it's talking about, and I even read their comments when they were coming up with this. And it basically was because they had some areas that you could call a resort zone and just put apartments in there. And there was nothing that would call it as a resort zone. So they were like, hey, we got to stop people from just coming in and doing apartments in these resort zones because there are resort zones and they wanted a commercial aspect to it. Now, the percentages and all that, I was kind of like, I don't know about that. But
Because I think, when I think of the apartments, I think of like, hey, we need to, that's not part of the resort zone. I think a
Well,
resort zone is.
and so
housing.
the only argument that they had was that it didn't go, it was against the intent of the code, but it wasn't a very good argument is what their idea. So it made sense to me when I read it to say, hey, we would like a component of this to be commercial if it's called our resort zone.
So to me, the whole thing should be commercial.
Except for and that's why I say 20%, but we're looking at, some of that residential area, the condos that they can rent, maybe on-site, people who live there to operate, those kind of things. So I do think we, tweak those numbers for sure. And I agree with you. I think if we're going to go through our general plan, because I think that's what has to happen first before this goes. And then we make this general plan that says, this is where we would say we would allow a resort zone. And then in that resort zone, we don't want just apartments showing up. We would like it to be a resort zone that's kind of benefit for the community. So that's why I liked that section in there. Obviously, I
what
think
we
the
need to
numbers
decide
can
is like,
change.
is, like when this was first brought to light, like I said, what we were thinking about doing is to have an overlay. So someone would come in and they would apply for a resort zone overlay, right? And it should be kind of almost easy to get that resort zone overlay, right? Because it doesn't entitle them to anything. But then we would list all the conditional uses or permitted uses in that resort overlay. And then you would determine if it was how to issue that permit and how to mitigate the problems of each one of them things. But
Well, I think a couple pages further, it actually shows what is permitted, conditional use. It does call, some things like that. The approach they took, and I really agreed with it, was I think that the town needs to say, hey, where do we think this big resort thing could go in our town? Where would we like that? So we dictate where that goes through the general plan. And then they can come in and decide, off of that, what they want to
what
put.
if someone comes in that's like not even in there, but they have like a better design for a ski slope? Got a bigger hill or something.
Yeah, then we
just a
have to look at
question.
that. But this was,
Most of the resort zones will be overrun by timeshares, stuff like that surrounding the resort. Like Fish Rock up there in Winchester Hills. Started out as a resort zone, golf course and a few things, and it all of a sudden just became a cluster of duplexes, triplexes, double condos, and that's all that's up there. There's no resort except the golf course.
right, and that's one of the reasons I think it's good to say that we have to have this much commercial and this much resort, right? And that was the problem that they had, was they were running into this, apartments, and there was really nothing other than to say it wasn't, it was against the nature of the zone.
Weren't you thinking your resort was going to be up there by the freeway and all that around the RV
So
and lake?
where this all kind of came into where we decided we needed to maybe come up with something is on the south end of the Firelight. There's 310 acres where they wanted to do a resort zone or complex. And so we didn't have anything in our general plan or anything that accommodates that. So we were like, hey, we might want to come up with something like that. If the town says it's okay to do it, because in the general plan, if we get consensus that says we don't want anything like this here,
That's what it says in
then we
here.
wouldn't do that, right? So
The appendix.
So did anybody else do their 10-page homework on it?
Yes.
I would like to see it. It's
Too
not
bad.
in, it's
No,
not
you
in
can't.
here. Is that mine now?
read it.
No.
Wayne,
I want to read it, but I can't read it all right now.
Wayne, I'll give you a copy of it.
I spent serious money making
I
that.
didn't get that, Daisy. I
So
didn't get this
what
one.
comments do you have, Val?
Yeah, I can't comment.
Do we even want to put in alcohol dispensing establishment? They're conditional, but do we even want to have that?
So.
It's already in our
That's a
code.
tough one.
And it does actually say that, I might be wrong on this. I believe it says that so much of this has to be that. Is that with one of the asterisks there? Alcohol, double asterisk, and then the double asterisk right here. must be uses, which I don't agree with. So those were some of the things I was thinking that we could strike out, and because it's an actual requirement that you have an alcohol business there, which,
That's also been on the DAUC licensing someplace.
yes.
With local consent.
Sean, you mentioned that if it aligns with the master plan, what the city
The general plan.
that they want in the general plan. Has that worked for you? Have you guys already looked at that? Like, is that something you generally want at all before you go through all the details of what you
That's-
want in it?
What it says is the discussion item as we're trying to figure a path
Oh, I
forward.
didn't know.
So
Did you already go through some of it?
what we came up with, I think,
It's only
at
been a
least
discussion item for like 6 months.
in discussion, was that this is contingent on if we want this in our general plan. If we can, that the townspeople come together and say, hey, yeah, we can see something like this being here. So that's what the general plan would do, and we're in the process of rewriting the general plan.
So, I was just gonna say when you were done. So we are in the process of that. So what we've done is we applied for a UDOT technical planning assistance grant. And there's about $38,000, about $40,000 to redo a general plan, 40 to 50. Ours was done in 2017. Considerable amount of changes have happened in Tokerville, obviously, since that general plan came in. And so we felt like it was probably necessary with all of the new things being proposed, that it's time for the public to have some more input and some more say. And maybe look at what they thought they wanted and see if that's still what they want, or if they want to speak out and do that. So we're actually reviewing our general plan, our master transportation plan, and our zoning ordinance.
And we started this resort zone before we really got into the master plan has to say it's okay before we do this. So then we kind of came to the idea that, hey, we found a resort zone, a document that we're kind of looking at that might work, but we kind of put it on the back burner and said, let's just work with it a little bit until that general plan is.
Yeah, and like Sean's saying, it's like, it would stand to reason that at some point in time, someone's gonna approach us about some sort of a resort. It would be good to be on the front end of that rather than chasing
And
it.
we already
Say, oh my gosh, we don't have
have
anything
one.
to stop this if they want to, or oh my gosh, we don't have anything to provide a path forward. And some of the things like we were talking about, it's like, you need 100 acres to do an MPO. You need 100 acres. So if you own 95 acres, you couldn't put even a hotel or swimming pool, in this way, or an amphitheater, or whatever, any sort of event center or things. And so it's just kind of, like he said, it's on the back burner, but it's such a big thing that it makes sense
We don't
to
want
do that. And it makes sense to do it in conjunction with the general plan. The general plan, the public might speak out and say, we don't want to see this ever, anywhere.
We don't know what they're gonna say, or some people might say, no, I have a huge piece of commercial property and this would fit perfect. We don't know what people will come back and say. And that's why this is kind of in the background. It's not any sort of, but this started long before I got here, long before Darren got here, this conversation of this. But that was one of our things, is like, we are gonna redo the general plan. It's in the works, the drafts, it's going. So we'll start to have public comment periods. It takes about 8 months to redo a general plan.
And so the public, whether they say yay or nay, is a
Yeah,
Commissioner Preston.
yeah, multiple rounds of public hearings.
We talked about changing the 5 acres to 100, right?
Yeah.
We had that.
So,
That's on F1.
exactly.
On 5 acres, that'd be tough.
And one thing that will be interesting about.
Right above where we're.
That's fine.
We're trying to we need to stop all the other conversations, sorry. I don't know who was talking at
F1.
F1.
Uh-huh. Right above where the 20% that we were talking about. It's like page 3.
Page 3?
Yeah,
I'm on page 87.
it's right above that big thing right there.
Okay,
Okay, so F1, we talked about changing 5 acres to 100,
okay,
Right here.
right?
all right, so you want to change that to 100? What does everybody else feel? So good?
Well, I think
I'm
resorts.
confused about that, because at 100 acres, you'd be an MPDO.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it would be like, yeah,
When you guys really look at this, the process of this is harder than an MPDO,
yeah.
way harder.
So why,
Easier to-
I'm guessing I would wonder why someone would come in for a resort zone if they could just get an MPDO and propose that within their MPDO.
They still can't do them uses in an MPDO though. Some of the uses like an amphitheater and like you still have no, you have no permitted use for any of that.
Hmm.
I think we have to have somebody,
I agree with Val, it should be, the acreage should be.
maybe
large.
50 acres.
Bigger than, yeah, that.
Lar- is, I mean, as big as
Okay,
you
let's
can.
go with 50 for
I
now.
do think
because we're
these
gonna
things,
just- we're
things
gonna be
that
drafting this for a
really
long time.
impact the community, so I don't really necessarily, I mean, I want it not to be easy to come in and do a
Right,
resort
and
zone.
they will impact them and you don't want them everywhere. You do not want a bunch of resorts just all over everywhere, every neighborhood.
That's not much.
Yeah.
No, because the acreage across the freeway that they were talking about for that other thing was 400, wasn't it? Yeah, I think that was 400.
600.
So how about we
Was it
split the?
six?
We're just having a discussion.
Did you, I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt you, but did you make a comment on the alcohol stuff?
Yeah.
What would you like to do with that part?
Well, I wondered why we even need to have that on there as a
Right,
conditional.
that
I mean,
condition.
you know, does it fall within our Tokerville city?
We said, we allow sale of alcohol and it is a conditional use permit already. They would have to apply for a conditional use permit.
Right, they would have to.
The problem is that everybody that's coming to this resort are not from this community that
Yes, true.
this, so that's their way of life.
Yeah,
We should
that's
scratch
true.
We
the
have to
double.
accommodate
That's what I
That's
think.
trick
somehow.
It's
not a
actually a
requirement.
requirement, but I don't think we need to.
We can remove the requirement portion,
We'd be like discriminating against them.
saying that it's a requirement to have photo art, craft galleries, and retail showrooms.
In my
Yeah, we need
opinion,
to really
we're
look at
changing
that.
a lot of those things.
Okay,
Yeah, so we take the 25% of the required 20% must be uses with the double asterisks.
Yeah.
So we could strike that line. We just have it down on the bottom as a
Or we
condition.
put in our own things that we want it to require, right? So if we say we want it to be, you know,
As an
One other
alternate,
comment about that, as far
Can I
as
do
that
that?
is a required
What?
use.
As an
That
alternate, can I
actually
look at
makes
that
it
and
even
make
more
changes?
difficult to do that. If you've got,
Good.
I mean, obviously, you sell it, but if you have to get an actual liquor license and you have to do that, I mean, it's very difficult to get a full-on liquor license.
Right.
So leaving it in there might help you, not hurt you in some ways. If that's required and the state will not issue them a liquor license, or if they can't get it, it might stop some of these. I mean, I'm not saying it will or it won't, but I'm just saying it's a point to consider. It's hard to get some of those. The what? Oh, okay. It is.
build a casino and they would not give him a liquor license because it was too close to all the residential areas and the schools.
Church and schools, yep.
That'd be the first thing you'd look at.
What's we struck that requirement off already?
No, I am not. I'm just saying that I've seen that.
That's what I'm saying. I'm saying that requirement, if they can't get it. Yeah, I mean, that's.
Okay, let's move to the next one.
Let's see, so no less than 20% of the total gross floor area of the collective structures in the master plan must be designated as commercial. Okay. Not less than 20.
So I'm, and like Joey said earlier, 100% commercial, right? I mean, that's what a
Yeah.
reserve zone kind of is, other than it has
Yeah.
residential, but I thought that was a little bit on the low side.
I agree.
I don't, you know, I would think we could bump that number up so we are more
60%
resort
or-
versus
Right.
Yeah.
residential.
Let's do a weird number like 53.
Okay, 53%. Are you writing these down? I don't have my.
I'm writing them down.
We'll do you think 75 is good on that? 75%?
I would think
Well,
so.
are hotels and motels considered commercial? Right. So if you're on a resort.
Right.
You're having hotels and motels, not apartments and condos.
Right.
So which one do we want? So the higher your percentage, the more hotels and motels you get. So you're not fighting the
Airbnbs.
Well, we have to tell you guys that this is like the confliction portion of this nightly rental is they can't do, they can't do nightly rentals unless
In a
they,
hotel.
unless they have a hotel or a motel or an RV park. That's why that exclusion in there, in the previous code that we talked about is there. So you can't do condos and nightly rentals. You can't do any of that according to our current code. So, I mean, we have to think about what's in there for that. Hmm?
Like a condo, you couldn't do an Airbnb because it's not over one roof.
No, because you can only own 2 nightly rentals as a citizen of Tokerville. And you can only have 2. And you have to be a citizen of Tokerville. So these people aren't citizens so that's why we're changing the nightly rental code, because you would only be able to rent 2 rooms out of
Oh, no, that's what I mean, but I'm just saying for the resort, like to prevent the apartments, condos, townhomes, you would want that number super high so that you do have hotels coming in and building.
And I don't really understand their 20% and why they can't.
We'll move it to 75. Okay, what's the next one?
Well, that's right where this came from. Or close
Okay,
to
a
us.
minimum of 30% of the gross floor area in the master plan must be designated as hotel rooms or nightly rentals. Prohibiting rentals that last longer than 30 days, a minimum of 30%.
That's kind of goes along just what we're talking about. We want,
Yeah.
at least we want more motels rather than the other ones. So
Right.
that's good.
Right.
Okay.
So what do we want there?
But that's 30% under 20%.
Now it's 30% of your 75%.
75%, because we changed the 20 to 75.
What's the next one?
I
Nope.
guess I have a question about that though, where it's saying like the collective structures, right, the master plan must be designated commercial. What if the resort has a big, what if it is a resort, but their thing is not necessarily commercial? What if their thing is that they do like conferences? And it's just tons of conference rooms, I mean, I'm just saying like,
Yeah.
I think
you know what I mean? Like I've been to those, like in St. Louis, they have the hotels, but they're just conference rooms all at the bottom, or the big gardens inside their things.
But it's still
Or,
Wouldn't fall under a resort zone. That would fall under a different.
I actually think it says something about conference rooms in there. Yeah, conference facilities is a permitted use.
yeah, like it's good, you're gonna have some other permitted
So
uses.
and it does have that in there currently as a permitted use, conference space. I don't know how they would calculate commercial versus.
Yeah, that's why I'm wondering if it's just the whole thing is.
Big document. Every time I look at it, it's like, okay, what's next?
If the developer chooses to include commercial that exceeds 20% or nightly rentals that exceed 30% in any phase,
What we probably have to do is come in here and identify every nightly rental problem before we even,
Yeah.
because that's a direct conflict of our code too.
yeah,
Well, remember, this is just a discussion item on
Right,
this draft. It
right.
doesn't mean we're married to this. by
no,
any means.
I mean, really, I mean, nightly rental, RV nightly rental.
Well,
I think you're gonna have multiple
that's what-
ordinances to address all of this growth.
that's what I thought we had talked about doing, was a residential nightly rental, an RV one, right? Hadn't we?
Well, we gotta separate the two.
Yeah.
Be separate for sure.
Right. That way we don't have to touch what is.
I think that was a mistake.
Hey, Joey, could I make a comment or a question? Or maybe one thing we ought to do, everybody ought to grab this, print it out, redline it, bring it back to Afton and myself, and we will combine it into redline form of things you want stricken from that, different things, and we'll put on there, we'll redline it and say, Val had these comments, and we'll put her in red, we'll put Joey's in green. Yeah, because we're just kind of kicking this thing around right now, and it's not very productive. Yeah,
Do that. We-
if,
First 10 pages back to,
to staff, yeah, to staff, not Darren, staff. No.
and then you guys can present to us what's good and bad about it.
Well, but at least that way you guys would have a red line copy of what what each, and then you guys, we would like you guys to look at that, and I can do that, but it'll probably be in a month. Yeah. Well,
We'll move to the next discussion item.
Yeah.
Sure.
For sure.
Okay.
Look at it.
Okay, we'll go to number 2. So the reason this is on here is we wrote that new code to make a new R110 zoning. And the attorney brought it back and said, basically what we did is we're going to strike R112 completely and now just have R110. So instead of putting that on the agenda and open for public hearing, I says, well, let's have another discussion about it because there's nothing in it. There's nothing pressing on this issue. It was just a recommendation that we have smaller zones. So the big discussion item is, do we want to strike R112?
I personally.
If we already have R112 in the
No.
city, how do
I would say.
you
we
do
leave it.
that? So
No.
Because
I
there's,
agree.
and I don't remember exactly where the R110 discussion came up. I believe you were kind of
well, the city council
Question to do
had
that,
said
isn't it?
we want a smaller zone.
right.
And so that's what we did.
Yeah, I would rather just
We
leave
went
it. If
200
there's nothing
less.
pressing, I would say leave it as
Where are you gonna
is.
put this smaller zone?
Do they need to?
Gonna mix it all in with acres and half acre?
43,000, so
Isolation by
R12
themselves.
is
Yeah.
pretty close to
Like
that.
self-help home things.
I don't know. So I think if we're not going to go below R112, because I think R112 needs to stay in the code, just because we
Yes.
have R112, we need to
Yes.
identify
Yeah.
a code for it. So we can't remove it. So I know other cities have R110, they have R18, and they have so do we want to look at maybe going to an R18 and presenting that, or do we want to just stick with the R112 and?
Probably good favor sticking the R112.
I agree.
I don't like I don't like 8,000s and I don't like 6,000s and they're not good for the city. And they're really
Quarter
not
acre lot is
affordable
10,000
housing when you get to that point.
Well, you know, the reality too is that the MPDO, the 2 MPDOs that are currently at conceptual approval, they have that's what the MPDO gives them. They can go in and they can change that zoning. They can make smaller, that's part of
They're
their thing.
clustered
So,
together.
yeah,
They're
they
a
can-
cluster.
Yeah, they can do that there. So the
They're
thing
not
that we're,
widespread through the city and
and the thing that I keep bringing forth on this is that
Fine, getting rid of
on,
it.
on the old portion of town everywhere, that all the stuff that's existing right now, everybody's happy with the current zoning we have. And everything else is probably going to be an MPDO, except for Wasatch Builders.
And then they can have their smaller little areas, So I agree. I don't know why we need to do anything smaller.
Your public hearing on R110 would be entertaining.
Okay, well.
So you just want to scratch it?
I would say
We'll just
scratch.
I
let it go
agree.
away?
Yep.
I think so.
And if the city council comes back and says we want smaller zones,
We already have it drawn up, so we can just pop it back in there.
give it back R110?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm good at that.
Okay, so I want to make one comment before we go, but on some of them items that we had discussion items, I would hope that we do this discussion items there, and then when we come to make the motions on not reworking the whole ordinance, because it should have been done in the discussion item. But other than that, does anybody else have any comments?
I think part of our problem is that we haven't had a full body
Every time.
for like 3 or 4 meetings. I mean, it's been a long time.
Yeah.
So that's been part of our problem.
Cool. Stacy's smiling.
Sorry.
I would accept a motion to adjourn the meeting.
No more accidents, Stacy.
I make a motion to adjourn this meeting.
We have a motion to adjourn.
I would second
We have a motion and a second. We'll take a vote.
Aye.
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 So it's really cruelly long for a first timer.
We adjourn the meeting at 9:15.
And no
I thought city councils were horrible.
What the heck?